Welcome, dear listeners, to a journey not just through time, but through the gentle landscape of history, designed to calm your mind and perhaps, just perhaps, lull you into a peaceful slumber. Tonight, we ease into the delicious lie question, able world of ancient Roman street food, drift through the epic tales of legendary figures, and finally, immerse ourselves in the quiet wonders of ancient festivals and profound philosophies. As you settle in, perhaps dimming the lights and letting a soft, distant hum fill the air, allow your imagination to take flight. Picture the warm glow of twilight, the soft rustle of ancient leaves, and the subtle scent of distant embers. We are about to embark on a shared journey, so take a deep, slow breath and let the whispers of the past guide you. Feel the weight of the day lift and open your mind to the soothing rhythm of forgotten eras. Chapter 1. Flavors of the Roman Streets. A 1,000-year taste journey. You trudging through assume-baked Roman street, the worn leather of your sandals whispering against the ancient cobblestones. The air is thick with the murmur of 1,000 lives, the distant clang of a blacksmith, the shouts of vendors, and the subtle, art-high scent of ancient Rome itself. Your tunic, perhaps a bit too long, clings to you in all the wrong places. An persistent ache, robs behind your eyes. The kind of headache that only comes from drinking 5 cups of watered-down wine and making truly questionable decisions at the bathhouse earlier in the day. You certain lie not in the mood for a formal meal, no elaborate dinner party where you debate the subtle nuances of olive veritas, or watch owl, roasted pig being presented with fanfare. No. What you crave deeply is something immediate, something greasy, something that whispers of instant gratification and perhaps a fleeting moment of regret, something utter lie, unpretentious. That one task, too many questions, and one timed if you eat it with one hand while using the other to gently shoo away. A persistent, overly confident pigeon, thermopolium. Rome's chaotic fast food. And so, you find yourself drawn to the thermopolium, Rome's gloriously chaotic, wonderful live vibrant take on a street food joint. Imagine, if you will, an ancient version of a fast food counter, bustling with life, but perhaps with as lightly looser interpretation of modern food regulations. The layout is deceptively simple, designed for speed and volume. Sturdy stone counters, each with circular holes carved into its surface. Within these holes, large earthenware pots known as dolia sit bubbling, radiating warm and emitting a tantalizing if ambiguous, aroma. These pots are filled with whatever was hot, edible, and had successfully survived the morning's preparation. There are no elaborate menus here, none but neat, lie-printed labels explaining the day's offerings. No real sense of rigid order, just a bubbling, simmering stew of possibility, both literal and perhaps gastrointestinal. What delights await you on offer? Perhaps small, fried cheese balls that promise a delightful squeak when you bite into them, or questionable sausage links, whose precise origins remain a charming mystery. They might be pork, or they might be a lethal blend of Roman optimism and expediency. Then there's the mysterious stew itself, which may contain lentils. Or it may just look like it does. Its true contents known only to the chef and the gods, and floating in everything, permeating the very air, like a ghost you can taste and remember, is garum. This potent Roman fermented fish sauce was somehow both the ultimate seasoning an old social experiment, daring you to embrace its unique flavor. Cleanliness, let's not dwell on such trivialities. The chef, a weathered figure with a knowing glint in his eye, is like Lai wearing the same tunic he slept in, a garment that has probably witnessed more historical events than some senators. The spoon he uses to dele out portions has, without a doubt, seen at least 2 civil wars and countless hungry customers. Yet, the food is undeniably hot. It's delightfully salty, and it packs enough calories to get you through another afternoon of not dying in a crowded Roman street. Thermopolia were ubiquitous, truly everywhere, particularly in Pompeii, where almost every block boasted one, workers seeking a quick bite, students needing a cheap meal, wandering poets lost in thought, and even very confused tourists from Gaul, all gathered at these counters. They traded their humble sesterces for sustenance. That was fast, filling, and in truth, questionably legal by modern standards, and sure, it may give you a mild case of indigestion later, a gentle reminder of your adventurous culinary choice. But when your choices are limited to a cold, raw onion or whatever, spubbling, inviting lie at the corner stall, you follow your gut, hoping it forgives you later for the momentary indulgence. Roasted chickpeas. The Roman power snack. You've left the thermopolium, your dignity only slightly bruised, a faint lentil stain slowly forming on the pristine white of your toga. You re-walking through the forum now, the heart of Roman life, and just as you pass, grand orator, passionate lie, ranting about wheat subsidies, your stomach emits that ominous, familiar rumble again. You then need AFL meal. Not yet. Just a snack, something to chew on, something to occupy your mouth while you pretend to listen to the ceaseless political debates that echo through the marble halls. Enter roasted chickpeas, or, as they were more elegant lie, known in the Roman streets, Cicer Arietnum, a name that sounds incredible, fancy, but really translates quite simply to rocks pretending to be food. Vendors, their voices hoarse from constant shouting, sold them in humble clay bowls or small, unassuming cloth pouches, each competing in a glorious, noisy symphony of salesmanship. Hot chickpeas, one would cry. Crunchy chickpeas, another would shout. Chickpeas the thernatory. A third would add with a mischievous wink. They were roasted over open coals until they reached a consistency somewhere between delightfully crisp and unapologetically gravel, like they were salted heavily, because salt, it seemed, was the Roman answer to everything, a miracle preservative, a universal seasoning, and most importantly, an excellent disguise for the lingering taste of regret. And yet, despite their humble appearance and challenging texture, chickpeas were wildly popular. Soldiers, weary from long marches, munched them for sustenance. Senators, deep in thought, or perhaps plotting their next bribe, snacked on them between important discussions. Children chewed them with an almost adult solemnity, as if practicing for the rigors of Roman adulthood. They were cheap, remarkably filling, and didn't spoil easily, which made them ideal for tossing into a satchel for a journey, a simple lunchbox for a day's work, or if the mood struck at someone during a particularly dull gladiator match, there was lot of variety, mind you, no chili lime flavor to tickle your palate, no creamy hummus dip to soften the bite, just a humble bowl of rock-hard legumes, generously dusted with salt, and occasionally as a truly considered luxury served warm. Of course, the Romans, ever optimistic about their dietary choices, swore they were healthy. Chickpeas were said to promote virility, aid digestion, and even inspire deep philosophical thoughts, which sounds suspiciously like something a clever chickpea vendor might have made up to move product. But hey, if it worked, why not? Every now and then, you'd get lucky and find a soft one, a little chewy, a little mealy, and for a brief, blissful moment you'd think, this I isn't too bad at all. Then you de-bite the next one, and the sharp, undeniable reality would return, reminding you that Roman dentistry was still about 1,000 years away from solving this particular problem. Still, for a handful of coins, you got a snack that traveled incredibly well, lasted seemingly forever, and perhaps most importantly, gave you something to do with your mouth during those intermina, long political speeches, and in Rome, that quiet distraction was worth every cracked tooth. Globally, the aggressive cheesecake. Now your stomach, a fickle companion on this Roman culinary tour, is asking for something different, something sweet, perhaps something soft, definitely something decidedly less existentially crunchy. Your eyes scan the bustling street, and then you spot it. Avendor, with a tray of golden spheres, glistening enticingly in the afternoon sun. You approach cautiously, for in Rome, sweet things are often more deceptive than they appear. The vendor, with a conspiratorial wink, hands you one and simply says, globally, what you might wonder are these intriguing morsels. Picture, if you will, deep-fried cheese balls, not just lightly glazed but drenched, utterly soaked in gold, sticky honey. And no, this is not some whimsical Renaissance fair invention. Globally, were a very real and beloved Roman desert snack. They were made by mixing a ricotta-style cheese with flour, forming the mixture into small, perfectly round balls, deep frying them in shimmering oil until they were golden brown and crispy, and then, as if they decommitted a crime against moderation, soaking them in honey until they were dripping. The result, a sweet, savory, and structurally unstable delight. Bite into one too fast, and the hot, molten cheese inside would launch itself in the opposite direction. A surprising and potentially embarrassing projectile. The honey, thick and tenacious, would instantly glue your fingers together, ensuring that the rest of your day would involve a persistent buzz of curious bees, the playful nudges of stray dogs, or awkward, sticky hand gestures at passing senators, as you tried to maintain some semblance of decorum. But make no mistake, globally were an undeniable hit. The recipe for these little golden treasures even appears in Apicius, the close street thing. The Romans had too a comprehensive cookbook, testament to their popularity. They were concise, read a treat, suitable for elegant dinner parties, lively temple festivals, and certain lie for impressing anyone you were trying to subtly seduce through the sheer power of sugar. The texture was a study in contrasts, crispy on the outside, giving way to a molten, almost lava-like cheese interior. The taste, somewhere between a decadent dessert and a rhetorical question that asked, what if cheesecake decided to be aggressive? The Romans, bless their hearts, did not believe in restraint when it came to honey, and these things were practically candide cannon balls of sweetness. And while they weren't exactly common street food for the impoverished masses, frying cheese in oil required some resources. They did make frequent appearances at more upscale gatherings. Imagine a toga party ending with guests groaning happily, their pristine tunics, charming, lie stained with cheese grease, and a cheerful cloud of bees hovering like tiny, dedicated waiters. One bite could transport you to culinary heaven, a moment of pure, sticky bliss, or send you running to the near-street public fountain for an emergency finger rinse. There was truly no in-between. So, yes, while we moderns indulge in donuts, churros, and fried Oreos, the Romans had, globally, and in a way, they beat us to the punch. Deep-frying dairy and covering it in sugar was an innovation for them. It was perhaps a delicious revival of an ancient instinct. You just had to survive the glorious stickiness. Dates stuffed with nuts, nature's edible masonry. Having navigated the sweet chaos of globuli, you now crave something a bit more refined, perhaps less dripping, something that offers a hint of dignity, maybe even elegance. You find yourself drawn to a different vendor, and there on a delicate tray are what appear to be simple, rustic bundles of sweetness. Enter the Roman answer to gourmet dessert, dates stuffed with nuts, known as Dulea domestica, in recipes from Apicius. These little bundles were deceptively simple in their construction, yet profound in their impact. The process was straightforward. Take some fresh dates, sticky, deeply brown, delightfully squishy, and already halfway to becoming a luxurious jam. Carefully remove their pits, and then with meticulous care, cram them full of finely chopped almonds or walnuts, a crunchy surprise hidden within the soft fruit. Then, depending on your social status and your personal disregard for su bt liti, you would either drizzle them lightly with honey, roll them completely in it, or if you were truly aiming for opulence, drown them entirely. At first glance, they look utterly harmless. A rustic, charming little sweet, the kind of wholesome treat you'd proud lie hand to your grandmother. But beware, for these things were dense, incredibly dense, lie packed with flavor, and if left out in the relentless Roman sun for too long, dense enough to cause serious dental trauma. Imagine nature-sown candy, transformed into apatite, yet surprisingly firm, form of edible masonry. They weren't just for nobles, though the rich, definite lie flaunted them at their lavish feasts, demonstrating their sophisticated palates. Slaves and working-class citizens, too, occasionally got their hands on dried dates, especially around festivals when indulgence was briefly encouraged, and any digestive consequences were quietly ignored. The texture was, well, enthusiastic. The date provided a chewy, resistant embrace, while the nuts added a delightful, unexpected crunch. And the honey, it acted as ancient Roman superglue, binding everything together with formidable tenacity. Eating one often required a certain commitment, and ideally some privacy, as they stuck to your teeth, your hands, your toga, and occasionally, if you took the last one, to your personal relationships, nutrition-wise. They were surprisingly solid. Dates were high in natural sugar and energy, providing a quick, sustained boost. Nuts offered a valuable protein kick, and honey, while honey just made everything feel undeniably fancier. Romans claimed it aided digestion, a common refrain for any palatable food. But let's be honest, they were mostly just thrilled to have something sweet that didn't come with bones in it as an added bonus. These treats traveled exceptionally well, making them the perfect, thoughtful gift, a respectful offering, or a last-minute apology. Soldiers carried them into battle for a burst of energy. Lovers passed them like edible love notes, imbued with silent promises And if things got really rough, they even doubled as throwable objects with just enough heft to effectively make your point. In an empire that conquered the known world, this sticky, satisfying, and potentially dangerous little treat was one of its most beloved desserts. Stuffed dormice, a rich man's delicacy. Let's take a sharp turn now, dear listener, into the slightly E1 etching ed side of Roman culinary history. Because if there's some Roman snack that still raises eyebrows and elicits gasps today, it's this one. Stuffed dormice. Yes, you heard correctly. Small, fuzzy rodents with big, innocent eyes and an unfortunate tendency to end up on elite Roman dinner plates. Think of it as the original, deeply unsettling tension between adorable and appetizer. Now, to be fair, not everyone was out here eating what amounted to glorified pet hamsters. This was primarily Eric people thing, a status symbol of the highest order. Ordinary folks, the vast majority of the Roman populace, stuck with their more humble lentils and boiled onions. But if you were part of the Roman upper crust, the toga-wearing, poetry-quoting, villa-owning kind, you absolutely served dorm ice to your distinguished guests. Not out of necessity, mind you, but because, well, it was a statement. It screamed, "Look at my wealth, my refinement, my adventurous palate." The dormice themselves were treated to a rather luxurious, if ultimately fatal, existence. They were fattened in specially designed little terracotta jars called gliraria, which were essentially mouse-sized gyms with no exit, designed to encourage maximum plumpness. The goal was to make them nice and weighty before the crucial stuffing process. They would then be meticulously filled with a savory mixture of minced pork, fragrant herbs, and crunchy nuts. After this preparation, they were either roasted to a crispy perfection, dipped lavishly in honey, or for the truly adventurous, both. Because why just cross one culinary line when you can sprint past several with reckless abandon? Guests would pick them up delicately, perhaps with a slight hesitation, as if polite lie, pretending not to notice the small tail still attached. The flavor was often described as nutty, a calming lie vague term, but realistically, it probably tasted like greasy mouse and the subtle, lingering flavor of bad decisions. And the thing is, they weren't even illegal. In fact, dormouse farming was a regulated industry, overseen with official scrutiny that show-wide spread and accepted this peculiar practice was. The Romans wrote about it, joked about it, and even carved them on too fancy mosaics as if to proud lie declare, "Here lies Gaius. He had money, he had mice, but here's the kicker." Despite the undeniable weirdness, they were considered genuine delicacies, the foie gras of the Roman world. Lavish, controversial, and perhaps a little morally ambiguous. So why did they eat them? Because they could, because they wanted to, impress people, because culinary restraint was exactly in vogue when you effectively ran the entire Mediterranean world. To us, it sounds horrifying, a step too far. To them, it was finger food with an undeniable flair, a conversation starter, and an culture where eating flamingo tongues was even the weirdest part of the menu. A crispy, honey-glazed dormouse was practically tame, a quaint indulgence. Honey cake, laboom, a comforting brick. Naturally, after such an adventurous culinary detour, you deserve something comforting, something golden, perhaps something that definite lie does look back at you with large, innocent eyes. Enter the honey cake, or as the Romans knew it, libum. Now, to be clear, these weren't your modern soft, fluffy sponge cakes. light as a cloud. No one was carefully Instagramming slices of these. They were far too rustic for that. Roman honey cakes were dense, profoundly weighty, more like a sweet brick than a delicate dessert, and they came in all shapes and levels of chewiness, ranging from pleasantly spongy to a consistency that truly required a dagger to cut through. The classic Liebem recipe was deceptively simple. Fresh cheese, flour and egg mixed into a thick, peely-able dough. This dough was then shaped into a itty little loaf, often resembling a small bun, and baked on a leaf, because if you not baking on foliage, are you even truly Roman? Once baked, they were not just drizzled, not merely glazed. They were utter lye drenched in honey, the kind of soak that ruins tunics with sticky stains and tests the limits of friendships when there's suddenly one slice left. Honey was liquid gold in Rome, a multi-purpose marvel. It was a primary sweetener, a powerful preservative, a soothing skin ointment, and, apparently, the enthusiastic answer to the question, what should we generously dump on this question-able cake? The result was a sticky, slightly sour, cheesy sweet treat that clung, tenacious lie to your fingers, and perhaps your social reputation alike. They were served at solemn religious festivals, joyful family gatherings, and as sacred offerings to the household gods. This meant that, occasionally, your breakfast pastry might also double as a spiritual sacrifice, a little pressure for your morning meal. And just like nearly every other Roman dish, there were subtle class layers baked in. Poor families might use humble barley or rye flour, skip the more expensive cheese, and use only a splash of diluted honey, resulting in a cake in technicality only. The rich, of course, added exotic nuts, imported spices, and enough honey to effectively drown a centurion. But here's the kicker. They were universally beloved, the kind of thing people remembered fondly from childhood, fought over good-naturedly at banquets, and hoarded like a precious commodity, like bees protecting their comb. They weren't fancy. They certainly weren't trendy, but they were undeniably sweet, wonderfully sticky, and entirely capable of triggering minor property disputes. Imagine waking up in ancient Rome. The streets are already noisy with a cacophony of daily life. Your neighbor is shouting about overdue amphorae, and your head is pounding from last night's own cup of diluted wine that somehow turned into 4. You re-grog a bit broke and definitely late. Naturally, you reach for breakfast, but not eggs, not fruit, not even a proper sit-down meal. No. You're going with the classic Roman start to the day. Stale bread soaked in wine. Stale bread soaked in wine. Rome's lukewarm cereal. Yes, it was absolutely a thing. Romans, ever practical, called it sopem vinum, which sounds like a spell, but simply means bread in wine. Essentially, you took old, hardened bread, because fresh bread was either expensive or mysteriously missing, tore it into manageable chunks, and then drowned it, quite literally, in whatever wine-like substance was conveniently lying around. It was intoxicarious. It certainly was entreaty. It was, in essence, Roman cereal minus the milk, the sugar, and most of the joy, but it got the job done. The wine, humble as it might be, softened the rock-hard bread, just enough to make it chewable, transforming a potential weapon into sustenance. Red or white didn't matter. If it had fermented grapes in it and was vaguely liquid, it was going in. Occasionally, People added a sprinkle of herbs or a drizzle of honey, but that was reserved for special occasions. Or if you were trying to impress someone who had already seen you eat dormice and were thus beyond surprise. It was a breakfast of pure necessity and brutal efficiency. Farmers ate it before a long day in the fields. Laborers ate it before hauling heavy bricks in the blistering sun. Philosophers ate it while pretending not to quietly cry in public. If coffee junk starts modern civilization, this was Rome's lukewarm, wine-flavored equivalent. Of course, the elite mocked it, or pretended to, while secret lie indulging in their own, more refined versions using aged, honyad bread, and the smug expression of someone pretending to slum it for the experience. But for the average Roman, this was the real start to the day. And here's the twist. Sometimes it was an even breakfast. Some people simply dip bread in wine constant, lie throughout the day, during meals, during long speeches, during casual eavesdropping, in the forum. It was a food, a drink, and a lifestyle choice, all rolled into one. Was it nutritious? Barely. Was it dignified? Not especially, but it was soft, cheap, and soaked in alcohol, which in ancient Rome qualified as a definite win. Mystery meat sausage lucanica, street temptation, and adventure. Ah, sausages, humanity's ingenious solution to the eternal question. What do we do with the leftover bits? And now here was this meat, wrangling more enthusiastically embraced than in ancient Rome, where sausage making was less about rigid recipes and more about pushing the very boundaries of what could legally and ethically be considered red food. The Roman version, lucanica, was a sausage, named after the region of Lucania, though by the time it hit the bustling stalls of Rome, nobody really cared about geography. What they cared about was that it was salty, wonderfully greasy, surprisingly spicy, and often suspiciously chewy. Ingredients. Well, that's where things got exciting. Lucanica was often a delightful mystery of pork trimmings, liver, lungs, heart, and possibly things best left undocumented, if only for the sake of future archaeologists. Sanity. Seasoned generously with pepper, cumin, fennel seeds, and a dash of pure, unadulterated bravado. The mixture was then stuffed into an intestine casing and grilled, fried, or smoked, primarily to mask the existential horror within. And Romans, oh how they loved them. Street vendors grilled them openly on small, portable braziers, releasing clouds of meaty perfume into the already chaotic city air. People would line up, toga askew, coins in hand, eagerly waiting for their hot, greasy fix. Athletes ate them for a quick burst of energy before training. Philosophers ate them, and then perhaps questioned their own ethics afterward. Children begged for them, and occasionally, immediately, regretted it. Of course, sausage quality varied wildly. The ones at imperial feasts might be finely ground and delicately spiced, a true culinary art. The ones on the street, let's just say, the less you asked, the happier you were. There were persistent rumors of donkey bits, maybe even dog, certain lie organs UV never, Xinang Amadong butcher shart. Storage was also optimistic. Refrigeration didn't exist, and smoking meat was more art than science. So some sausages aged like a fine, pungent wine. Others aged like something you'd immediately report to the authorities. Still, they were everywhere, sold at thermopolia, devoured at arenas during gladiator breaks, carried into battle. A Roman soldier marching across Gaul could count on two things: sore feet and a dried, durable sausage in his pouch. It was calorie-dense, flavor-rich, and sturdy enough to double as a self-defense weapon if absolutely necessary. Roman pancakes. Literia, a flat disappointment with a drizzle of hope. Let's talk about Roman pancakes, or as they might have been known, flat disappointment with a drizzle of hope. In theory, a literia sounds promising. The name translates to another sweet, and it was essentially a basic pancake made from spelt flour, eggs, and milk. Sometimes honey got involved, sometimes not, and that inconsistency alone tells you exactly what kind of emotional roller coaster this humble food was. You'd mix the batter, a simple affair, and then pour it onto a pan over a fire that may or may not be cooperating with your culinary ambitions, and let the magic happen. Except Roman magic didn't. Tea typically involve fluffy stacks, golden brown edges, or rivers of maple syrup. These pancakes were thin, dense, and just sturdy enough to qualify as edible flooring if you were lucky. They'd be fried in a bit of oil and served with a generous helping of honey, perhaps a sprinkle of poppy seeds, if someone was feeling particular. Festive. If you weren't lucky, you got the version with no toppings, no sweetness, and a texture surprisingly reminiscent of a legal document. Still, they were popular. They were cheap, easy to make, and surprisingly versatile. They could be sweet or savory, eaten hot or cold, served at solemn festivals, somber funerals, and that awkward space between breakfast and guilt. Romans weren't looking for a breakfast revolution. They just wanted calories that didn't bite back. But make no mistake, if you're reimagining Amadorn pancake adorned with strawberries and whipped cream, adjust your expectations drastically downward. These were the kind of cakes that required strong teeth and low emotional standards. More fuel than food, more endurance snack than indulgent brunch. Yet they had their place. They filled stomachs, a crucial need in a bustling city. They paired decently with wine, an ever-present companion. They made you feel, however briefly, that you had some small control over your life, which in a world of invasions, political backstabbing, and mystery meat sausages was no small comfort. And sometimes, just sometimes, the batter would crisp just right on the edges. The honey would caramelize, and you'd think, this is almost good. That fleeting joy, that small moment of unexpected satisfaction, was the Roman pancake's true legacy, setting the bar just low enough to be pleasantly surprised. So, were they bland? Yes. Were they adored somehow? Also yes. Because in Rome, even mediocrity had its moment. Prefer ably served with honey, fried fish parts, the crunchy sea creature. There's a certain raw honesty in Roman cuisine. They didn't trend. Things were fancy. They certainly didn't trim the fat. And when it came to fish, they definitely didn't toss time with tidy fillets or delicate portions. No, they went straight for the bits. Fried, salty sometimes, utterly unrecognizable, and always crunchy. Imagine this, you re-wandering the bustling docks of Ostia. The scent of the sea mingling with the distant cries of gulls. Or perhaps you read just downwind from a fishmonger in the crowded Sabora, Rome's notorious working-class district. You catch a whiff of something sizzling, something distinctly fishy, something that's probably been sitting out since sunrise, radiating a defiant aroma. You follow your nose, and there it is, a greasy tray piled high with fried fish parts, lovingly coated in oil and what might be flour. or might be street dust. No one's entirely sure anymore. What exactly were you getting? Well, fish heads, tails, fins, and anything small enough to toss whole into a pan. Anchovies were a particular favorite, their small size making them ideal for frying. Sardines, to found our way into these sizzling street snacks. Occasionally, the Romans, with their adventurous palates, would venture into mystery seafood territory, frying whatever creature happened to flop into the net that day, ensuring a delightful surprise with every bite. The cooking method was elegant, simple. Heat up some oil, toss the fish in, and hope they crisp before they burn. Sprinkle generously with salt, and maybe askwort of vinegar if you were feeling particularly aristocratic. Serve it wrapped in a fig leaf for a touch of rustic charm, or straight into the customer's hand if hygiene was optional, which, let's be honest, it usually was. These little crunchy sea creatures were everywhere. Thermopolia served them as a quick protein boost. Market stalls showed TED about them. With enthusiastic sales pitches, kids bought them as cheap, satisfying snacks. And everyone knew that if it's been fried hard enough, you don't really have to ask what part of the fish it was. The crunch transcended all questions of origin. Nutrition ally. They were surprisingly decent. A good source of omega-3 South protein and calcium from the bones you were absolutely crunching through. Plus, they left a lingering scent of the Mediterranean, and that stayed with you for days. A fragrant souvenir. But here's the real magic. People loved it. Romans weren't looking for culinary elegance. They wanted salt, fat, and crunch, and these fish bits they leave read loudly, greasily, in a way that told your stomach, yes, I'm full, and told your dignity, we don't talk about this. Roman fig cake. The ancient granola bar. By now you've eaten bread soaked in wine, sausage stuffed with mystery, and a pancake that by all legal standards qualifies as a construction material. Perhaps your palate, and indeed your very soul, is craving something wholesome, something naturally fruity, something that quietly whispers, I made a good life decision today. Cheese snacks, Rome's, mozzarella sticks. At this point in your Roman culinary journey, you've eaten enough fermented, fried and honey-drenched material to seriously question your life choices. But don't worry, we haven't yet explored one of Rome's most cherished obsessions, cheese. Specifically, cheese snacks. The kind that could be utterly delightful or instantly regrettable, often within the same bite. Cheese in ancient Rome wasn't just a food. It was in many ways a philosophy. They had soft cheese, firm cheese, aged cheese, and the kind of cheese that, by modern standards, might easily count as a biological weapon. Romans loved to snack on cheese between meals, or more accurately, between other question-able decisions. Let's start with fried cheese patties, a common treat at thermopolia and taverns. These were made by mashing soft cheese, likely a ricotta-like curd, mixing it generously with flour or semolina to give it structure, forming little discs, and then frying them in shimmering oil until they were golden brown and irresistibly crispy. Sounds tasty, right? It was, but only if eaten hot. Let them cool for 5 minutes, and you were suddenly GNAing on something with the texture of an old sandal, a chewy testament to fleeting culinary joy. Some were sweetened with honey, turning them into aristic dessert. Others had herbs and were aggressively savory, a punch of flavor. Occasionally, someone would throw in nuts or dried fruits, which in theory sounded inventive, but often ended up tasting like someone accidentally dropped trail mix into a grilled cheese, creating a surprising, if not always pleasant medley. Now, if you were particularly unlucky, you might encounter aged Roman cheese. This was an tier delicate French brie, or a polite English cheddar. No, this was hard, intensely pungent, and frequently described as fragrant, which is ancient cook speak. 4. Daunting whole too deeply. Some versions were aged until they were more salt than cheese, a hardened, concentrated essence. Others were stored in open baskets, left out in the sun, and possibly used to repel unwanted guests. Cheese snacks were truly everywhere, served to soldiers for energy, offered at lively festivals, even gifted during Saturnalia, because nothing says I appreciate you quite like a block of dairy that could double as a paperweight. They were filling, cheap, and impressively shelf-stable, assuming you didn't time them fighting back. Little when you tried to chew, but for all their inconsistencies, the Romans adored cheese snacks. They were comforting, portable, and only occasionally threatening. In short, they were the mozzarella sticks of the ancient world, just without the mozzarella or the sticks. Garum, Rome's umami bomb. Some civilizations have ketchup. Others have hot sauce. Ancient Rome, they had garum, the fermented fish sauce that somehow miraculously ended up in or near just about every edible object in the empire. Let's be clear, garum was not subtle. It was not elegant. It was certainly not something you lightly drizzled. It was fermented fish juice, made by stuffing fish guts and whole, small fish into large clay pots, adding copious amounts of salt, and then leaving the entire mixture to sit in the sun for weeks, sometimes months, until it stopped screaming. Or at least, stopped smelling like it was screaming. The result? A dark brown, oily, intensely salty, and powerful, light tangy liquid that Romans pour over meats, vegetables, grains, and yes, every kind of snack imaginable. Bread dipped in garum, absolutely. Roasted nuts with a splash of garum. Why not? Fried cheese with a generous dollop of garum. You're living dangerously. But that's Roman cuisine for you, and it wasn't just for taste. Garum had serious social clout. There were different grades, much like fine wines. Some were humble versions for the poor, while others were so exclusive they were aged longer than your average gladiator. Liquidmen, all EC and other variations were sold across the empire with elaborate labels, boasting their origin's purity and probably imaginary health benefits. Think of it as the ancient Roman version of artisanal organic soy sauce, but with significantly more intestines. Now it should be noted that the smell of garum production was so intense, bad, it was legally restricted to outside city limits. That's right, even in Rome, where sewage flowed freely and public baths were occasionally experimental at best, garum factories were banned from the neighborhood. But once bottled and shipped, it was gold. Emperors hoarded it. Cooks swore by it. Hungry citizens slaughtered it. On nearly anything that didn't move, it was Rome's favorite flavor bomb, and its most wide lie tolerated all factory crime. Did people actually enjoy it? Apparently, yes. They praised it in poems. They included it in revered cookbooks. They wrote love letters to recipes that began with first, drown everything in garum. Was it healthy? Possibly. Was it overwhelming? Always. Did it add something magical to fried street snacks? If you like your magic strong, fishy and vaguely suspicious, then yes, absolutely. So, when you imagine Roman junk food, don't just picture cheese balls or fig cakes. Picture cheese balls and fig cakes generously soaked in fermented fish sauce, because that, dear listener, is what winning tasted like in Rome. Street nuts, Rome's original vending machine. You still crave a snack, something casual, something crunchy, something you can eat with one hand while waving the other dramatically at passing senators, perhaps to emphasize a point you silently making about wheat subsidies. Enter Roman street nuts. Walk through any bustling Roman marketplace, the Forum, the thriving port at Ostia, or the back alleys of Subura, and you hear the unmistakable sound of nuts roasting on open coals, not in the cozy, holiday-scented way we imagine today, but more like the Tantalisi smell of a burning street cart mixed with raw, salted temptation. Your choices were simple but satisfying. Almonds, walnuts, hazelnuts, and pine nuts, though the latter could cost Asmo fortune, and possibly your dignity if you dropped them. Most were roasted, lightly salted, and sometimes, for a touch of indulgence, flavored with herbs or honey. Simple, addictive, and wonderful lie pocket-friendly. Vendors sold them in little paper cones fashioned from recycled wax tablets or papyrus scraps, which occasionally still had grocery lists or bad poetry scribbled on them. A bonus layer of unexpected entertainment. And the Romans, they truly went nuts for nuts. Philosophers munch at them while pondering mortality and the meaning of existence. Gladiators downed them for a quick protein boost before their strenuous training. Drunken party guests tossed them into mouths and sometimes into amphorae with varying degrees of accuracy. Even the emperors snacked on them, though theirs were probably meticulously peeled, gilded, and like lie carried to them on a silver platter by someone with chronic anxiety. Some were even died. Almonds coated in honey were the close street thing Rome had to peanut brittle, and they were equally capable of cracking a tooth or winning your immediate affection, depending on how fresh they were. Of course, there were downsides. Overeating nuts, especially the garam-dusted kind, could lead to indigestion, awkward social consequences, and dramatic readings of your last will and testament. But that didn't stop anyone, because street nuts were fast, cheap, and deeply satisfying. They were the original Roman vending machine. Insert a coin, receive crunchy joy. No fuss. No mystery meat, no tales. Just a handful of salty delight in a city powered by wine, ambition, and low-grade chaos. Hangover food. Rome's hangover cure. UV partied like Asinator. UVE bathed in wine. Sung badly at a Saturnalia feast. Maybe even kissed someone who turned out to be your cousin Scousin slave. It's the morning after. Your toga's on sideways. Your mouth tastes like garum and question-able life choices. You need help. But in Rome, help does come in the form of aspirin or a steaming black coffee. No, what you get is a heroic, semi-medicinal snack and the vague, desperate hope that Jupiter still loves you. Enter hangover food, Roman edition. First up is the ultimate cure. All wine-soaked bread. Yes, again, because what better way to fix a wine-induced disaster than with more wine? Now merciful, lie absorbed into a stale loaf, so dry it threatens to exfoliate your gums. Or perhaps you re-handed a raw egg stirred into spiced wine, known as pusca ovata. Think of it as a protein shake, minus the refrigeration, the hygiene, or any semblance of joy, slug it down and try not to gag while someone older than the Republic insists it will restore your humors. Still woozy, time for a snack platter from Etruscan Hell, a combination of pungent olives, raw garlic vinegar-soaked onions, and maybe a bit of pickled fish, because nothing clears the sign uses like salty brine and fresh regret. One famous option was fried cabbage with cumin and oil, supposedly miraculous, realistically greasy, intensely pungent, and like lye to start more problems than it solved. Roman doctors swore by it. Roman diners mostly swore at it. There were also sweet options. Figs with honey and vinegar, or dates soaked in wine and generously dusted with pepper. These, to be fair, probably did help. They were sugary, hydrating, and just weird enough to distract you from your pounding headache. And if all else failed, you could always go full gladiator. A handful of raw barley, a raw onion, and a sharp punch to the chest to wake you up. No science, just confidence and shame, of course. Romans didn't call it a hangover. They called it being troubled in the head, which frankly sounds more accurate. And while their cures were hit or miss, they believed in them with the same fervent conviction they believed fried dorm ice were classy. So there you are, hunched over a thermopodium counter, sipping spiced vinegar and chewing cabbage, while quietly praying to Bacchus for mercy. Welcome to recovery, Roman style. Chapter 2. Hannibal. An epic journey of a legendary general. Before he became the scourge of Rome, before his war elephants thundered over the impossible peaks of the Alps, Hannibal Barca was just a boy. Wide-eyed, sharp-minded, and already, even at a tender age, forged in the nascent fires of revenge. The year is around 237 BCE. Carthage, the once proud North African maritime power, has just suffered a defeat in the First Punic War, losing to its relentless rival, Rome, and the man nursing that wound deeper than anyone else. A wound that festered with humiliation and fierce determination, was Hannibal Barca, the boy's father. Hamilcar wasn't just a general, he was a living symbol of Carth. In resilience, fierce, brilliant, and bitter lie humiliated by Rome's victory, and he was far from done fighting. So, when Hamilcar prepared to leave for Iberia, what we now call Spain, with a grand ambition to rebuild Carthage strength and carve out a new empire, he took his 9-year-old son Hannibal with him. But this was no ordinary bonding trip, no casual family excursion. This was an indoctrination, a baptism into a lifelong mission. Before they departed, legend says Hamilcar brought young Hannibal to the sacred temple of Baal, the patron god of Carthage. The patron god of Carthage, he had his tiny hand placed firmly on a bloody sacrificial altar, a powerful, visceral symbol with a solemn intensity. Hamilcar made his son swear a sacred, unbreakable oath that he would never, ever be a friend to Rome, not tolerate them, not ignore them, never ever be a friend. Think about that for a moment. Not many kids are raised with math, swordplay, and a lifelong vendetta as their primary school subjects. But Hannibal was entranced like other children. His classroom was the rough, demanding war camp. His father was his demanding general, and his entire curriculum was meticulously designed for revenge. As they marched into Iberia, enduring the harsh realities of military campaigns. Hannibal watched and learned with a keen, observant mind. He saw his father win brutal battles, form shaky, often temporary alliances, and conquer territory mile by painstaking mile. Every Roman ambassador that came sniffing around, trying to interfere with Carth, Ag, in Aean expansion, Hannibal studied, absorbing their arrogance and their veiled threats. Every negotiation that fell through, every Carth, Ag, and Aean soldier who bled and died on foreign soil, he remembered it all, each memory a tiny, bitter seed. By the time Hamilcar died in battle years later, and command passed to Hannibal's brother-in-law, Hasdrubal the Fair, the boy was already hardened, a seasoned veteran in miniature. When Hasdrubal was assassinated years later, Hannibal, now a formidable 26-year-old, was voted by the army to take command, not by the distant Senate, not by the cautious elders back in Carthage, but by the soldiers themselves, the ones who had seen him grow up, fight alongside them, and lead with natural authority. And in that pivotal moment, the sacred oath of Acud Harden, Ir, Revoca, Ply, into the unwavering mission of Amon. Rome may have won the first round, but Hannibal Barca was about to change everything. They thought they knew about warfare and about fear. The Iberian campaign, sharpening the blade. Hannibal didn't wait to warm the commander's seat. The moment he took control of the Carth, Ag, and Aean forces in Iberia, he unleashed a campaign so brutal, so effective, so utterly relentless, that it would make Rome twitch from across the sea. A premonition of the terror to come. He began with the tribes of Hispania, a fractured, proud, and constant lie squaw, BB-ling collection of peoples, often at each other's throats. Instead of merely marching in, like a Hannibal, with his characteristic blend of pragmatism and cunning, used diplomacy, strategic marriage alliances, and even outright bribery to win some of them over, turning former adversaries into reluctant allies. For the rest, for those who resisted his will, he used steel, swift and decisive. Tribes that dared to defy him were crushed with a devastating mix of battlefield brilliance and psychological warfare. Hannibal didn't just fight battles. He staged them with the precision of amateur dramatist. He'd often allow one part of his army to feign retreat, drawing the enemy in, only to then flank and surround them once they thought they were winning, turning their perceived victory into a terrifying trap. He played minds as easily as he played swords, manipulating expectations and exploiting weaknesses, and the soldiers, his loyal legions, absolutely loved him for it. Hannibal shared their food, marched alongside them on grueling campaigns, and fought bravely in the thick of combat, never asking them to do what he would untdo himself. He was unsown, pampered general, watching from a gilded chariot. Aloof and distant, he bled with them. He celebrated with them. He inspired loyalty the same way he inspired fear in his enemies, in huge, overwhelming doses. As Carthage's power grew inexorably in Iberia, Rome began to feel the growing pressure, a tightening knot of anxiety across the Mediterranean. They had signed a treaty with Hasdrubal before his death, which specifically stipulated that Carthage would not cross the Ebro River, a clear line in the sand. But Hannibal, fueled by his childhood oath, wasn't interested in Roman paperwork or diplomatic niceties. He had a much bigger game in mind, a grander strategy that transcended mere border disputes. So he deliberately targeted the city of Saguntum, a staunch Roman ally just south of the Ebro. Attacking it was unjust bold. It was practically a direct declaration of war, a deliberate provocation. Rome watched nervous Lie, unsure if Carthage would somehow restrain this ambitious, audacious young general. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The siege of Saguntum was brutal, prolonged, and chilling Lie efficient. Hannibal systematically starved them, bombarded their resilient walls with relentless siege engines, and finally, after 8 grueling months, overran the city with a ferocious assault. Survivors were either mercils, sly killed, or sold into slaw. A harsh object lesson for any who might consider resisting Rome's new nemesis. Rome had its answer. Hannibal was anti-bluffing, and he's certain Lie was unafraid. The Roman Senate was, of course, outraged, their indignation echoing through the marble halls. They immediately demanded that Carthage hand over Hannibal for violating the treaty. Carthage's response, a collective shrug, a polite but firm refusal. The Senate debated, the nobles bickered, but ultimately, no one in Carthage had the guts, or perhaps the genuine desire, to rein him in. Hannibal had become bigger than Carthage itself, a force of nature, and now, with Iberia firmly under his belt, and Rome fuming across the sea, he turned his piercing eyes toward Italy, not by ship, not through a polite declaration of war, but by doing the utter lie impossible. He would bring the war directly to Rome's doorstep, and he would do it with elephants, crossing the Alps, an impossible feat. When Hannibal announced his audacious plan to invade Italy, not by sea, not through any treaty but by land, directly through the towering, formidable Alps, his officers, seasoned veterans though they were, must have thought he had lost his mind. The Alps weren't just mountains. They were death traps, snow-covered, treacherous, crawling with hostile Celtic tribes. An utter lie, unforgiving. No sane general would attempt such suicidal passage, especially not with tens of thousands of soldiers, hundreds of pack animals laden with supplies, and most incredibly, a handful of African war elephants. But Hannibal was untiming for sanity. He was aiming for shock and awe, for a blow that would shatter Roman complacency. In 218 CE, he began what would become the most daring, almost mythical, military maneuver in ancient history. With an army of around 50,000 men and 37 elephants, Hannibal marched north from Iberia, crossing the Pyrenees, skirmishing with fierce Celtic tribes, and eventually reaching the Rhône River. There, facing the mighty river, he used rafts and local guides to Aeneas Lie, ferry his massive elephants across. Yes, elephants on rafts. The sheer logistical audacity alone was insane, a testament to his engineering genius. Rome was caught completely flat-footed, utter lie, unprepared. They expected him to come by sea or at worst, through the expected coastal routes. But Hannibal was rewriting the rulebook, and he hadn't even reached the Alps yet, when they finally began the brutal Alpine ascent. Everything that could go wrong did. Landslides, buried vital equipment, blinding snowstorms, disoriented the troops, altitude sickness, bone-chilling, freezing winds, and relentless starvation killed thousands of his men and animals. Supplies ran desperately low, morale plummeted, and men began to desert, slipping away into the unforgiving landscape. Elephants, their massive bodies ill-suited for icy terrain, slipped on treacherous paths and plummeted into deep ravines, their mournful trumpets echoing across the desolate peaks. One soldier reported Lie had to chisel frozen horse hooves free from icy rock with epic axe. a horrifying image of the desperation they faced. But Hannibal, a man of unwavering resolve, kept moving. He rallied his men by pointing to the distant, promised plains of Italy, painting a vivid picture of rich farmland, immense plunder, and the sweet taste of revenge against Rome. He used fire to shatter stubborn ice, vinegar to weaken resistant rock and sheer, indomitable will to drag his battered army over nature steadily as obstacles. After 2 harrowing weeks, barely alive and with fewer than half his original force, Hannibal finally emerged on the other side. Into the fertile Po Valley, his men were exhausted, frostbitten, and battered beyond recognition. But in Italy, and especially in Rome, they were horrified, paralyzed by disbelief and fear. They had never imagined an enemy would knock on their door in such an impossible fashion. The Alps weren't supposed to be crossed, let alone with elephants. But Hannibal had done it. It was unjust ambush. It was a devastating message. Rome I send safe. Nowhere's I am here. And he was planning on leaving anytime soon. The Battle of Lake Trasimene, a perfect ambush. Hannibal didn't twat a single moment once he hit Italian soil, even without diminished, exhausted force. He immediately began recruiting discontented Gallic tribes in northern Italy, those long-standing enemies of Rome, and they flocked to him, eager to throw off the Roman yoke. Because Hannibal didn't just promise liberation, he proved it with blood, with swift, decisive victories. Rome, still stunned but arrogant in its long-held power, scrambled to send legions to intercept him, confident they could quickly deal with this upstart General Consul Gaius Flaminius, burning with the self-assured confidence of the Republic, took command. He wanted a swift victory, a glorious one that would restore Roman pride after Hannibal's ridiculous, humiliating Alpine stunt. But Hannibal had already chosen his battlefield, and it was intoing to be glorious for anyone in Erdcloak. The chosen place was Lake Trasimene, a foggy, narrow valley with the serene, unyielding waters of the lake on one side and steep, forested hills on the other. It was, in Hannibal's brilliant mind, perfect for an ambush. He meticulously stationed his infantry in front, clearly visible, acting like tempting bait. He then skillfully concealed his cavalry and elite troops in the hills overlooking the pass, hidden in the early morning mist that frequently enveloped the area. On June 21, 217 BCE, Flaminius, eager, overconfident, and completely blind to the meticulous trap that awaited him, charged his legions in. As the Romans advanced deeper and deeper into the valley, Hannibal SP rang the jaws shut. His cons, allied troops exploded from the hills, slamming into the Roman flanks with devastating force. His cavalry, expertly positioned, cut off any hope of retreat. The Roman line, stretched thin in the narrow pass, had nowhere to maneuver. Now here to form proper ranks, it was instant, brutal chaos. Roman soldiers drowned in the lake, trampled each other trying to flee, or were simply slaughtered where they stood. Unable to fight effectively, Flaminius himself was cut down, dying valiantly, trying to rally his collapsing army. In just a few horrific hours, an estimated 15,000 Romans were dead, thousands more captured. And Hannibal, he didn't lose a single officer. The ambush at Lake Trasimene became the largest and most successful ambush in military history, a chilling testament to Hannibal's tactical genius. Rome panicked, streets filled with the screams of grief and desperate prayers. Mothers wept openly for their lost sons. The Senate, in utter despair, appointed a dictator, Quintus Fabius Maximus, to deal with the unprecedented crisis. But battle was finished. He had invaded their sacred land, annihilated their legions, and now he roamed Italy like a ghost, impossible to catch, devastating everything in his path. Yet, even after this unmitigated disaster, Rome, with its deep-seated pride, stubborn lie, refused to negotiate for peace. That was fine with Hannibal. He didn't want peace. He wanted to humiliate them further, to break their spirits in the one place they thought themselves invincible, on the battlefield, at the very heart of their empire. And his deadly masterpiece was still to come, the Battle of Cannae, a symphony of annihilation. If Lake Trasimene was Hannibal's masterpiece of ambush, then Cannae was his symphony of annihilation. By 216 BC, Rome was done playing cautious. No more waiting, no more defensive strategies. They would meet this Carthage in Ian head on, they massed, the largest army they had ever fielded. Around 8,000 men, under the joint command of consuls Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terent Ius Varro. It was twice the size of Hannibal's army, a human tide designed to crush him with sheer, overwhelming force. Hannibal knew it, and it is said he simply smiled. He meticulously chose the battlefield, a wide flat plain near the town of Cannae in southern Italy, perfect for cavalry movement and intricate maneuvering. Then he arranged his troops in a deceptively simple, yet utterly brilliant formation. His weakest infantry, mostly Gauls and Spaniards, formed a shallow crescent at the very center, intention ally pushing forward. His stronger African infantry waited, patient, lie on the flanks, hidden from immediate view. His cavalry, his real hammer, flanked even wider on both sides, ready to strike. The trap was set, a living, breathing net. On the fateful morning of the battle, the Romans advanced in a dense, powerful column eager to punch straight through Hannibal's center, confident in their numerical superiority. And they did. At first, Hannibal's crescent began to bend inward under the immense pressure, retreating but not breaking, drawing the Romans deeper into the trap like a funnel. The Roman infantry surged forward, further and further into the Carthage in Ian lines, believing victory was within their grasp, that they were about to break the enemy, that somewhere in the jaws snapped shut. Hannibal's African infantry on the flanks wheeled inward, a perfectly timed maneuver, enveloping the Romans from both sides. His cavalry, having already routed the Roman horsemen with devastating efficiency, circled back and attacked from the rear, completing the encirclement. Now the Romans were completely surrounded. No retreat, no breathing room, just utter chaos and unbred blood. In the blazing August heat, men suffocated in the crush of bodies. Unable to even raise their swords, panic set in, a visceral, primal fear, and Hannibal's men systematically slaughtered them, cutting them down in one of the most lopsided massacres in military history. An estimated 50,000 to 70,000 Romans died in a single day, more than the entire population of many ancient cities. It was the worst defeat Rome had ever suffered, and remains one of the deadly battles of all time. And Hannibal, he didn't march on Rome, not because he couldn't, but because he knew Rome would not fall easily. He needed reinforcements from Carthage, siege equipment, and time to exploit such a monumental victory. But Carthage hesitated, paralyzed by political infighting and fear of Hannibal's growing power. Even after handing Rome its darkest day, Hannibal stood alone in Italy, and Rome, wounded, vengeful, and now very, very afraid, was planning on letting him go unpunished. Years in exile. The indomitable spirit. After Kenny, Hannibal's name alone could silence a Roman crowd. Mothers used it to fright and their disobedient children. Hannibal has arrived. Hannibal is at the gates. And yet, strangely, despite his proximity and devastating victories, he never entered the city of Rome itself. For 16 long, arduous years, Hannibal roamed the Italian countryside like a phantom, unbeaten, unpredictable, and completely without the reinforcements he desperately needed from his homeland. He won the loyalty of many southern Italian cities, turning them against Rome, and brought chaos to Rome's long-standing allies. But Carthage, for all its riches and potential, stubborn lie, refused to send him the support he needed to finish the job. The Carthage in Ian's Senate, rife with political factions, Thea read his growing power and charisma more than they desired Rome's ultimate defeat. His enemies at home whispered dark lie about his ambition, his independence. They were more comfortable letting him slowly bleed Rome dry than fully arming him for a decisive final strike. So Hannibal was forced to adapt, becoming a master of survival, fighting guerrilla-style skirmishes, harassing supply lines, destroying crops, and always staying just out of Rome's reach. The Romans, under the Fabian strategy, perfected by Quintus Fabius Maximus, nicknamed the Delayer, refused to give pitch-ed battle. They shadowed him, avoiding open conflict, starving him of the opportunities for grand, decisive victories he craved. But Hannibal still scored significant victories. He crushed Roman forces at Hardonia, ambushed them and even destroyed entire consular armies that dared to chase him. And he kept doing it year after year, without ever losing a major engagement. But time was slowly turning against him. Rome, battered but relentless, adapted. They built more legions, trained new commanders, strengthened their alliances with unwavering determination. While Hannibal wandered with a shrinking, aging army, Rome expanded its power like a hydra growing new heads. And the war began to shift elsewhere. Rome invaded Iberia, systematically cutting off Carthage in Ian's supply lines and denying Hannibal any hope of aid. Hannibal's own brother, Hasdrubal, tried heroically to bring reinforcements by crossing the Alps, just as Hannibal had years before. But Rome intercepted him, crushed his army, and in a brutal, symbolic act, threw Hasdrubal's severed head into Hannibal's camp. That message was chilling. Lie clear. You're alone now. Hannibal's grand dream of breaking Rome from within was slowly fading. He had turned Italy into a graveyard of legions, a testament to his tactical brilliance. But without reinforcements, without siege engines, without unwavering political backing, he simply couldn't deliver the final, crushing blow. Still, he refused to leave. He had promised his father as a boy that he would be no friend to Rome, and he kept that promise. Every single year he remained on their sacred soil. But soon, Rome would come knocking, not in Italy, but on Carthage's own shores, and Hannibal, the indomitable general, would have no choice but to go home for the final, ultimate fight, the Battle of Zama. The final showdown. 203 BCE, the tide had fully turned. Rome had clawed back from disaster, conquered Hannibal's strongholds in Iberia, and taken the fight directly to North Africa, to Carthage's very doorstep. Leading the charge was Scipio, African US, a young, brilliant Roman general who had meticulously studied Hannibal's tactics. learning from the master himself. Rome was no longer content to wait. They wanted Carthage destroyed, utterly, and to save itself from utter annihilation. The Carthaginian Senate, with heavy hearts and desperate prayers, had to do the unthinkable. They summoned Hannibal home. After 16 years of near mythical campaigning in Italy, Hannibal the legend finally left the land he had bled for, the land he had haunted. He returned to Carthage to defend a city that had, in truth, abandoned him, a city that had failed to provide the support he needed. And he returned to face Amon, Scipio, who was trained in the very art of Hannibalic warfare, a formidable mirror of his own genius. The final showdown came at Sama in 202 BCE. This time, the armies were nearly evenly matched, a rare occurrence in Hannibal's career. Hannibal commanded a force of seasoned veterans, new levies, and a formidable corps of 80 war elephants. His signature weapon, Scipio, meanwhile, had disciplined Roman legions, well-trained and unyielding, and crucially, Numidian cavalry led by Massinissa, a former Carthage in Ian ally, who had shrewdly switched sides, giving Scipio a vital advantage in mounted warfare. Hannibal opened the battle with a massive elephant charge, a thunderous wave of destruction meant to shatter the Roman lines and sow panic. But Scipio had planned for this. He ordered his troops to part, creating wide, open corridors that led the elephants safe. Lie through their ranks, the beasts, confused and disoriented, either panicked and ran harmless, lie between the Roman formations, or, worse, for Hannibal, even turned back, trampling his own lines in their confusion. What followed was a fierce, brutal infantry clash. Hannibal's veterans fought valiantly, their discipline and experience pushing back Rome's front lines, threatening to break them. But then, Scipio's cavalry, having already routed the Carthage in Ian, horsemen returned from the flanks and attacked from behind, just as Hannibal himself had done so masterfully. At Cannae, the roles had reversed. Hannibal, once the undisputed master of encirclement, was now its victim. The Carthaginian formation collapsed. Overwhelmed and surrounded, Carthage was forced to surrender. The terms were brutal, designed to cripple any future Carthage in Ian power. They had to give up their entire fleet, pay a massive indemnity to Rome, and promise never to wage war without Rome's explicit permission. Hannibal had lost, but it wasn't just a military defeat. It was the death of a vision, his lifelong mission, his sacred oath to break Rome, script on the Mediterranean, and it was shattered in the north, African dust. Yet even in defeat, Rome didn't kill him. They feared him too much, feared making him a martyr. Instead, they let him live knowing full well, perhaps with a chill, that they hadn't seen the last of him. Because Hannibal Barca was done making history, not yet. The afterglow of exile. The hero's end. Hannibal returned to Carthage, not as a defeated general but as a survivor, a legend in his own time. While Zama had broken Carthage militarily, stripping it of its power, Hannibal still commanded immense respect among the people. They saw him not as the man who lost the war, but as the man who nearly won it, against impossible odds, a testament to his indomitable spirit. So what did Hannibal do? He reinvented himself. Again. He became a politician. Yes, the very man who had once commanded elephants through the Alps now sat in the Carthaginian Senate, rooting out corruption, reforming finances, and trying desperately to repair the shattered state. He slashed taxes, paid off crippling debts, and revitalized Carthage's economy, quickly gaining a reputation as a brilliant, if often unpopular reformer. But Rome was watching from the sidelines with indifference. They fear-read Hannibal sharp, strategic mind far more than they fear-read his sword. A strong Carthage, even a seemingly peaceful one, was an unacceptable threat if Hannibal was at the helm. So Rome accused him falsely of conspiring with enemy states, of plotting new wars. Cornered once again, Hannibal fled. Thus began his second life, a life of a hunted exile, drifting through the ancient world. He wandered from court to court, a military consultant for hire, offering his unparalleled genius to foreign kings. First, he went to Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire, Rome's newest rival in the east. Hannibal tried to rally them for another great war against Rome, but Antiochus, tragically, ignored much of his sound advice and lost spectacular lie, only further cementing Rome's relentless influence. After Antiochus' defeat, Hannibal kept running. He became a ghost drifting through Asia Minor, pursued relentlessly by Roman envoys who, with unwavering determination, demanded his surrender at every port, every city, and yet wherever he went he left whispers, stories, and a lingering, potent fear. The name Hannibal still sent shivers down Roman spines, a testament to his enduring power. Despite his defeats, he remained a potent symbol of defiance, a one-man rebellion against imperial arrogance. He could entrace new armies. He had no homeland, number, political power, just a brilliant mind, a long, imposing shadow, and enemies who never, ever stopped watching him. By now he was in his 60s, gray-haired, his face etched with the lines of decades of war and exile. But even then, Hannibal remained sharper than most living generals. His strategic intellect, UMD, and Rome still was unsatisfied. They wanted him erased, not just from politics or the battlefield, but from the very story of their world. So, they came for him one final time, and Hannibal, true to his character, would not let them have the satisfaction of his capture. By the early 180s BCE, Hannibal had become a living legend, and, ironically, a liability not just to Rome, but to every kingdom that dared to shelter him. He was now hiding in Bithynia, a small kingdom in Asia Minor, ruled by King Prusius I. Hannibal, ever the strategist, even helped the king win Hannibal battle using a trick straight out of his old playbook. Catapults loaded with clay jars, filled with venomous snakes, launched on 2 enemy ships too, so chaos and fear, even in his final years. His mind was still 2 moves ahead, but Rome didn't care about snake jars. They wanted Hannibal gone forever. They pressured PRUs, sent emissaries, and made thin lie, veiled threats. Eventually, word reached Hannibal that his sanctuary had been betrayed. Roman agents were closing in on the villa where he was hiding, the net finally tightening around him. He didn't run this time, according to legend. Hannibal had long kept a small vial of poison hidden in a ring, carried with him as a final, desperate insurance. If Rome ever read him like an animal, he would go out on his own terms, with his dignity intact. Now the moment had come. He reported wrote a short, defiant message. Before taking the poison, let us relieve the Romans from their long anxiety, since they think it too tedious a task to wait for an old man ZSE. Just like that, it was over. Hannibal Barca, Rome's greatest nightmare, died not on a battlefield, but in a foreign land, hunted, exiled, and alone. And yet even in death, Rome could bury him. They destroyed his city, razed Carthage decades, later in the Third Punic War, and salted its earth, ensuring nothing would grow there again. But they never forgot him. Centuries later, Roman historians, men who should have hated him, wrote about his brilliance with awe, a grudging respect. He had led from the front, fought against overwhelming odds, and outwitted every Roman general sent to kill him. He crossed the Alps with elephants, devastated Italy for years, and gave the greatest military machine in history. A fear it would never truly shake, and he did it all, while staying true to one thing, his boyhood oath, to never be a friend to Rome, even in exile, even in death. Hannibal won a different kind of war, the war for legacy, and in that war, he remains undefeated. Chapter 3. Ancient Celebrations. Secrets and revelry connecting humanity and divinity. Every autumn in ancient Greece, as the leaves began to turn and the air grew crisp, a strange, profound transformation would grip the land between Athens and the small, sacred town of Elias. Is Rhodes, filled with chanting pilgrims, their voices echoing in unison. Smoke and incense drifted through the hills, carrying with them the scent of unsent anticipation, and somewhere in the deepening darkness, under the flickering torchlight, and shrouded in absolute secrecy, something sacred and forbidden took place. This was the Eleusinian Mysteries, the most famous and profoundly mysterious religious festival of the ancient world. It was unjust a celebration. It was a spiritual initiation, a journey into the deepest truths of existence. And unlike the rowdy Dionysian orgies or the public pomp of Olympic festivals, this one came with ironclad rules. Break the silence. Speak of what happened inside the sacred hall, and you could face execution. The core of the festival centered around Demeter, the venerable goddess of the harvest, and her beloved daughter, Persephone. According to the ancient myth, Persephone was tragically kidnapped by Hades, the brooding god of the underworld, destined to be his queen. Demeter, devastated and heartbroken, caused the world's crops to wither in her profound mourning, plunging the earth into a barren winter. Eventually, a divine deal was struck. Persephone would spend part of the year underground with Hades, bringing winter, and part above with her mother, bringing spring and summer. This powerful myth became a profound metaphor for the agricultural cycle itself, death and rebirth, decay and renewal. But the mysteries weren't just agricultural. They were cosmic to the Greeks. This was simply about farming or the changing seasons. It was about the fate of the soul, about life beyond death. Participants, known as Mystai, underwent a multi-day journey of preparation. They fasted, purifying their bodies and minds. They bathed ritually in the sea, cleansing themselves of worldly concerns. They carried sacred objects, their purpose shrouded in symbolism, and then, at Eleusis, they finally entered the Telesterion, a great, hallowed hall where the innermost rites, the very heart of the mysteries took place. What exactly they saw or experienced inside is still fiercely debated by scholars and historians to this day. Some think it involved a symbolic reenactment of Persephone's dramatic return from the underworld. Others believe it was a visionary experience, perhaps aided by a hallucinogenic potion called kike, a mixture that might have altered their perception of reality. Whatever it was, it profoundly left people changed. From powerful emperors like Hadrian to profound philosophers like Plato, many of the greatest minds of antiquity went through the Eleusinian Mysteries and emerged convinced that death was not the end, but merely a transition. This was religion not as blind obedience, but as profound transformation, a sacred encounter with the fundamental cycles of life, loss and renew. And for over 1,000 years, the Eleusinian mysteries endured, lasting longer than most empires, a testament to their deep spiritual impact, until one day Christianity rose. The old gods were outlawed, and the sacred secrets of Eleusis were buried forever, guarded by an unbroken vow of silence. And so, the mystery lives on, a quiet whisper in the annals of time. The Opot Festival, Pharaoh's divine parade. While Greece cloaked its sacred rites in mystery, ancient Egypt preferred something far more spectacular. Public religion on parade, a dazzling display for all to witness. And no festival embodied this more majestically than the Opet Festival, held annually in the grand city of Thebes, the spiritual heart of the new kingdom. The Opet Festival was one of the most magnificent and profoundly important religious events in ancient Egypt. Its primary purpose was to rejuvenate the pharaoh's divine essence and reaffirm his sacred, unbreakable bond with the gods, especially Amun-Ra, the chief deity of Thebes, and his divine family. It began at the colossal temple of Karnak, a sprawling complex of pylons, courtyards, and hypostyle halls, home to the mighty god Amen, his serene wife Mut, and their youthful son Khonsu, collectively known as the Von Triad. Priests, adorned in pristine white linen and performing ancient rituals, would carefully carry the sacred state ooze of these deities, sealed within golden shrines, on two magnificent ceremonial boats called barks. These were no ordinary boats. They were massive, gilded, and often carried on the shoulders of dozens of priests, their synchronized steps echoing through the city streets. Later, the barks were floated down the Nile itself, majestically moving along the sacred river. Their destination was the Luxor Temple, about 2 kilometers away, linked to Karnak by Agrand Avenue, lined with hundreds of sphinxes, creating an AWE-inspiring processional path. The journey between the temples was anything but silent or soul-MN. It was vibrant, theatrical, and thoroughly drenched in page entry. Dancers swayed to ancient rhythms. Musicians filled the air with the sounds of flutes and drums. Acrobats performed feats of agility, and chanting priests created a continuous chorus, their voices rising and falling. Calm mourners came out in droves, lining the streets and riverbanks, not just to watch, but to participate in the joyous atmosphere. For many Egyptians, this was their rare chance to see the divine, not hidden away in the inner sanctums of a temple, but paraded openly, proudly, and dazzlingly through the very heart of their city. And this was unjust ritual for show. The pharaoh himself joined the procession, often taking part in sacred reenactments within the temples, embodying the divine king. In some eras, it was profoundly believed that the god Amen merged spiritually with the pharaoh during the ceremonies, recharging his divine mandate to rule Egypt. It was a reign wall of power, not through conquest, but through cosmic approval, a deep affirmation of order. There was also a deeply human element during the festival, the strict boundaries between priest and peasant, god and mortal loosened. People feasted, drank, and danced with abandon, their joys echoing through the city. It was joy wrapped in divinity, a precious moment when heaven touched earth. However briefly, the Opet Festival lasted anywhere from 11 to 27 days, depending on the period and the pharaoh's budget. And while each celebration had its own unique flavor, the core message remained the same. Egypt was in balance, the gods were pleased, and the divine order of Mat, truth, justice, and cosmic harmony still reigned supreme. For the Egyptians, that meant everything. Saturnalia, Rome's joyful chaos. If the Eleusinian mysteries were about divine secrets and the Obed festival about royal divinity, then Saturnalia was something else entirely. A week-long party where Rome gleefully abandoned its rules. A delightful plunge into delightful chaos, held every December in honor of Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture, time and liberation. Saturnalia was a deeply rooted festival, celebrating the end of the harvest, and a nostalgic longing for a mythical golden age, a time when Saturn supposedly ruled and all men were free and equal. And for a few chaotic, blissful days, Romans tried to truly relive that dream. It began with Osel Amen sacrifice at the Temple of Saturn in the Forum, followed by a grand public feast where citizens gathered to share food and laughter. Then, the real fun began. All social norms were flipped on their heads. Masters served their slaves. A truly revolutionary act. Senators, usually clad in dignified togas, wore colorful, relaxed tunics. Gambling, typically banned, was openly permitted in homes and taverns. Work stopped. Schools closed. The courts shut down. Rome didn't function, at least not in its usual rigid sense. One of the festival's most bizarre, yet beloved traditions was the election of a Saturnalian king, sometimes called the Lord of Misrule. This was often a low-ranking citizen, a slave, or even a child, given mock authority to issue absurd, whimsical commands. Sing naked in the streets, balance a plate on your head. Obeying these ridiculous orders was all part of the fun, a joyous act of rebellion against daily order. Saturnalia was also a time for exchanging gifts, small wax candles, ceraya, little clay figurines, sigillaria, and even poetry, often humorous. It was light-hearted, full of laughter, and had a warm th that feels dearly familiar to us today. In fact, many scholars argue that Saturnalia is one of the cultural ancestors of Christmas. The timing, the gift, giving, the candles, the feasting, it all echoes through time. But Saturnalia wasn't just a holiday, it was a societal pressure valve. For a society so rigidly structured, with slaves at the bottom and senators at the top, it allowed for the illusion, however brief, that everyone was equal. That maybe, just maybe, there could be a return to Saturn's mythical golden age of harmony. Of course, when the festival ended, everything snapped back into place. Slaves returned to servitude. The Senate resumed its bickering. The streets quieted, returning to their serious hum. But for that week of reversal, Rome became a theater of joy, chaos, and shared humanity. Because even an empire, no matter how powerful, needs a break from pretending it has everything under control. Nowruz, fire's purification and world's rebirth. Long before alarm clocks and New Year countdowns, ancient Persians were already celebrating a festival of rebirth, balance, and fire, one that remarkably still survives today. Nowruz, the Persian New Year, rooted deeply in Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oddest monotheistic religions. Nowruz wasn't just about turning a calendar page. It marked the spring equinox, a precise astronomical moment when day and night are perfectly balanced, a profound symbol of cosmic equilibrium to Zoroastrians. This balance reflected the eternal, ongoing struggle between Ahura Mazda, the benevolent force of light, truth, and order, and Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit of darkness and chaos. Now, Ru symbolized the victory of light over dark, of cleanliness over corruption, and hope over despair. Preparation began weeks in advance, a meticulous ritual of purification. Homes were swept clean, walls washed thoroughly, and old debts settled. This was unjust spring cleaning. It was a spiritual purge, a cleansing of the soul. Everything dirty, old or chaotic had to go. As the eve of the new year approached, fires were lit in courtyards and along city walls, casting a warm dancing glow into the night. On the Chauharshambi Suri, the last Wednesday before Nowruz, people would leap over these flames, shouting, "Give me your red color health. Take away my sickness, paleness." The fire sacred in Zoroastrian belief wasn't just heat and light. It was purification, a divine conduit. Then came the half-seen table, an altar-like arrangement of 7 symbolic items, all beginning with the Persian letter S. Sabz, SP routed greens for growth and rebirth. Seer, garlic for protection and health. Samanu, a sweet pudding for abundance. Senged, dried fruit for love. Seb, apples for beauty and health. Sumac, berries for the sunrise. And Sirka, vinegar, for wisdom and patience. Each item represented a moral or cosmic value, an aspiration for the year ahead. Temples, known as fire temples, held special ceremonies during this period. Zoroastrian priests in pristine white robes chanted sacred hymns from the Avesta, their holy texts, and offered fragrant woods to the ever-burning sacred flame. For believers, it was a time to reflect, to realign with Asha, truth and righteousness, and to embrace the turning of the cosmic wheel. But Nowruz wasn't just solemn. It was ex-uber and lie joyous. Families gathered, often traveling long distances to be together. Tables overflowed with delicious food. Children received thoughtful gifts, and musicians filled streets with the lively sounds of drums and flutes. For a society that prized cosmic order, this was a moment when everything reset, not just the year, but the soul. Nowruz outlived empires. It was celebrated by the Achaemenids, the Parthians, the Sassanids, and it continues today across Iran, Central Asia, and beyond. Few ancient religious festivals have endured this long, but then again, few are built so elegant, lie around something as universal and eternal as light returning to the world, a perennial promise of renewal. The great Dionysia, Athens' drama and ecstasy. In ancient Athens, worship didn't always mean quiet, incense, and soul, and silence. Sometimes it meant masks, abundant wine, and a god who knew how to throw a party. Dionysus, god of wine, fertility, theater, and sacred madness, a deity who embodied both wild abandon and profound revelation, and no festival captured his chaotic brilliance quite like the great Dionysia, held every spring. This festival was some fringe cult celebration. It was one of the most important public events in the Athenian calendar, a civic and religious cornerstone. It honored Dionysus not primarily through animal sacrifice or soul chants, but through drama, tragedy, and comedy, performed on a grand scale in his very name. It began with a jubilant procession through the city. Citizens carried giant phallic symbols, yes, really, waved ivy-covered staffs, and chanted hymns in a joyful, boisterous throng as they led a statue of Dionysus to the theater of Dionysus at the foot of the Acropolis. There were flutes, lively dancers, and a palpable tidal wave of wine-fueled enthusiasm, setting the stage for the performances to come. Then came the heart of the festival, the dramatic competitions. Over several days, playwrights competed in a sacred contest, each presenting 3 tragedies and 1 satyr play. These weren't casual shows. They were state-sponsored events, judged by elite citizens, and watched by up to 15,000 people at a time in the open-air theater. A dance was considered a civic duty, a communal experience. Even prisoners could sometimes be released on bail just to attend, highlighting the festival's importance. The themes were grand and universal: God's fate, hubris, revenge, war, and human suffering. Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, these masters told stories that ripped the soul open, forcing Athenians to confront the deepest questions of existence. Imagine watching old IPOs discover he married his mother, with your neighbors beside you, gasping in collective horror and catharsis. It was unjust entertainment. It was ritual catharsis, a purging of emotions. And after the profound tragedies came the comedies, raunchy, politically charged, and often wildly absurd. Aristophanes used them to mock politicians, question war, and skewer society itself with biting wit. Nothing was off limits, but at its core, Dionysia was about more than just theater. It was about stepping out of yourself, about breaking down the masks society forces us to wear, and putting on literal ones to explore truths we couldn't otherwise say aloud. It was madness with meaning. Dionysus was untapped, orderly god. He was wild, untamed, a bridge between civilization and its primal roots. The Dionysia gave space for that side of humanity to breathe, shout, laugh, and grieve. For the Athenians, this wasn't mere escape. This was religion, a mirror held up to the soul, with a wine cup in hand and the god of static transformation watching from the wings. Purim, a celebration of laughter and resistance. Among ancient religious festivals, few are as raucous, theatrical, and subversively spiritual as Purim, a Jewish holiday that's part survival story, part political satire, and all about divine irony. Purim commemorates the events told in the Book of Esther, set in the vast Persian Empire under King Ahasuerus, likely Xerxes too. The plot sounds almost like a thrilling drama. From the great Dionysia, a courageous Jewish girl named Esther becomes queen, bravely hides her identity, and eventually risks her life to stop. Again, Aussie idol, plot hatched by the king's villainous advisor, Haman, to annihilate all the Jews in the empire. She succeeds. Haman is hanged on his own gallows, a poetic justice, and the Jewish people are miraculously saved. It's a story about the dramatic reversal of fate, the hidden workings of providence, and the transformative power of courage. But unlike solemn religious festivals, Purim is pure, unfiltered, joyous celebration of survival that leans heavily into laughter, liberation, and even a bit of playful chaos. The festival begins with a public reading of the Megillah, the Book of Esther, often performed like Achaemenid play with much fanfare. Every time Haman's name is mentioned, the crowd gleefully drowns it out with graggers, noisemakers, boos and shouts, actively participating in his condemnation. Children dress up as Esther, Mordecai, or even Haman himself, embracing the spirit of imaginative play. costumes, and general chaos are not just encouraged. They are an essential part of the celebration. Then come the traditional commandments of celebration, feasting with lavish meals, gifting food to friends, mishloch, manut, giving charity to the poor, matano lavianim, and most famously, drinking until you can distinguish between blessed is Mordecai and cursed is Haman. Yes, that's actually written in the Talmud, a testament to the holiday's emphasis on overwhelming joy. But behind the exuberant festivity lies something profound. Unlike other Jewish holidays, God is never mentioned by name in the book of Esther. Not once. It's the only book in the Hebrew Bible with that unique distinction. This absence forces readers to look for hidden divine intervention, for the subtle hand of providence, a powerful lesson in faith without direct, explicit revelation. Purim teaches that even when miracles dawn took like parted seas or fire from heaven, they can still unfold behind palace doors, through acts of courage, risk, and unlikely heroes. So people celebrate with parody, masks, satire, and vibrant storytelling. They laugh in the face of death. They mock the villain, and in doing so, they affirm something deeply spiritual. Survival is sacred, and joy is a profound act of resistance. Lugnasad, the Celtic harvest dance, in the misty hills and forested valleys of ancient Ireland, as the vibrant peak of summer began its gentle decline. The beginning of August marked a sacred and deeply communal event. Lugnasad, pronounced Lunasa, the Celtic festival honoring Lugh, the multifaceted god of light, craftsmanship, and war. Unlike the Grand Temple festivals of Rome or Egypt, Lugnasad was celebrated outdoors, on windswept hilltops in lush fields, and by ancient sacred wells. It was antique about imperial spectacle. It was about the land, the vital first harvest, and the fragile, ancient bargain between humans and nature. Lugh, the namesake of the festival, was a solar deity, a shining warrior, and a master of all arts, embodying skill and brilliance. But Lugnasad was just about worshipping him directly. According to myth, Lugh held the first festival to honor his foster mother, Teltu, who died from sheer exhaustion after clearing the plains of Ireland to make way for fertile farmland. In her honor, people gathered to give fervent thanks for the first grain harvest and to ritually ensure the earth would continue to provide for the year ahead. So how did they celebrate? It began with a ceremonial cutting of the very first sheaf of grain, a symbolic act of partnership with the land, followed by heartfelt offerings to the gods and the spirits of the land, acknowledging their generosity. This was unjust symbolic. It was deeply practical. If the harvest failed, winter would be cruel and unforgiving. Gratitude and ritual were a form of spiritual insurance, a plea for continued bounty. But Lugnasad was also a social explosion. People traveled for miles, sometimes from distant territories, to participate in lively fairs, bustling markets, fierce competitions, and exhilarating athletic games, often referred to as the Tai Eltan Games, a kind of mystical precursor to the Olympics. Contests included running races, wrestling matches, thrilling horse racing, and even feats of poetry and storytelling, celebrating both physical prowess and intellectual artistry. It was also a prime time for trial marriages, an ancient form of commitment with an escape clause. Couples could commit to union that lasted a year and a day. If it didn't work out, they could walk away literally by standing back to back and walking in opposite directions. Symbolize their mutual release. The gods it seemed, had no issue with ancient prenups. There were bonfires casting dancing shadows, elaborate feasting with the bounty of the land, and dancing on sacred hills, celebrating life and abundance. But always, beneath the revelry, was a humbling awareness: nature gives, and nature takes. Lagnas AD was both a celebration and a gentle warning, a time to enjoy the first fruits, but also to begin preparing for the darker, colder days ahead, in a world ruled by the relentless cycles of the seasons. This festival marked the crucial shift from abundant sunlight to the encroaching shadow. The wheat was in hand, a testament to hard work, but winter was already watching, patient and inevitable, holy. A carnival of color and fire, of rebirth, in the heart of the Indian subcontinent, as the last vestiges of winter gently melt into the vibrant embrace of spring. An explosion of color, music, and fire erupts across villages, towns, and cities. It's loud, it's wild, it's sacred. This is holy, one of the most joyful and profoundly symbolic festivals in ancient Hindu tradition. Known today for its iconic clouds of colored powder and Rio-Tos water fights, Holi has deep religious and mythological roots, a vibrant tapestry woven from ancient stories. At its core, Holi celebrates the victory of good over evil, the glorious arrival of spring, and the burning away of the old to make room for renewal. The festival begins the night before the main color festivities with Halika Dehan, the ceremonial bonfire. Its origins lie in the poignant myth of Prahlada, a devout follower of the god Vishnu, and his tyrannical demon father, Hiranyakashipu, who in his arrogance demanded to be worshipped instead of Vishnu. When Prahlada steadfastly refused, his father conspired to kill him by placing him on the lap of his sister, Halika, who was immune to fire, believing she would survive while Prahlada burned. But divine justice had other plans. Halika burned to ashes, while Prahlada emerged miraculously unharmed, protected by his devotion. Every year, Holika's effigy is burned in bonfires across India, a powerful symbol. The fire symbolizes the destruction of ego, hatred and evil, and the cleansing of the soul through light and heat, purifying the spirit. And then comes the color. The next morning, as the sun rises, the streets transform into a living kaleidoscope. People enthusiastically throw gulal, vibrant colored powders, at each other, drench friends and strangers alike with colored water, and dance with abandon to the rhythmic sounds of drums and flutes. It is impossible to stay clean or somber. The infectious joy sweeps everyone into its embrace. But this chaos is not random. It is ritual chaos. Social boundaries collapse. Rich and poor, old and young, men and women all become equals under layers of red, green, blue, and yellow. Enemies reconcile. Grievances are forgotten, and strangers become companions in the joyful melee. For one glorious day, the world becomes unrecognizable, and beautifully so, shedding its rigid structures. Holi also deeply connects to the legend of Krishna and Radha, where Krishna, self-conscious about his dark skin, playfully aired color on Radha's fair face. Their divine romance became an eternal metaphor for playful, innocent love and divine unity. That is why Holi isn't just fire and purification. It's flirtation, joy, and affection, a celebration of connection. Underneath the vibrant celebration is a profound spiritual message. The cycle of seasons, the resilience of the soul, and the inherent beauty in embracing impermanence. Because after the flames die down, and the colors slowly fade from your skin, what remains is the timeless lesson Holy was always trying to teach. Light returns, joy is sacred, and rebirth is always just around the corner, waiting to unfold. Bonadi Festival. Rome's secret matriarchy, amidst the thunder of Roman armies and the pomp of imperial parades, there existed a ritual so secret, so exclusive, that even Rome's most powerful men were banned from attending. No senators, no priests, no emperors, only women. This was the festival of Bonadi, the good goddess, held each December at the home of Rome's highest magistrate, typically the consul or praetor. The festival was both deeply religious and shrouded in absolute mystery. It honored a goddess associated with fertility, healing, chastity, and the abundant earth, but her exact origins, her precise name, and her specific functions remained tantalizingly elusive, and that was entirely by design. Everything about Bonadi was cloaked in feminine secrecy. The rites were conducted by the Vestal Virgins, Rome's most sacred priestesses, chosen for their purity and dedication, and they were attended only by elite Roman women, the matrons of the most powerful families. Men were strictly forbidden, not just from participating, but even from knowing the rituals, the details of what transpired behind closed doors. In fact, not even male historians of the time knew what happened during the ceremony. Their accounts are filled with speculation and rumor. What we do know comes almost entirely from scandal. In 62 BCE, the festival exploded into public controversy, an incident that shook Roman society. That year, Julius Caesar, then serving as Pontifex Maximus, chief priest, was hosting the rites in his home as required, even though he himself couldn't attend. But his wife Pompey was in charge of hosting the female-only celebration. Things took a scandalous turn when a reckless aristocrat named Publius Clodius Pulcher, a notorious troublemaker, disguised himself as a woman and brazenly sneaked into the ceremony, allegedly to seduce Pompey. He was caught, creating an uproar. A sensational trial followed, turning a private, sacred ritual into a very public spectacle. Although Clodius was ultimately acquitted, through extensive bribe, and political maneuvering, Caesar famously divorced Pompey, declaring that Caesar's wife must be above suspicion, a phrase that echoes through history. But beyond the scandal, the Bonadi festival reveals something rare and significant. A sacred space entirely controlled by women. For women, it was armament. When their concerns, fertility, health, family well-being, the rhythms of the body, were placed at the very center of religious life. You need not be inhibited by male presence or judgment. It was a brief, precious moment when Rome's rigid patriarchy stepped aside, and the divine feminine reigned in secret. Wreaths of myrtle, a symbol of Venus and often associated with sexual love, were banned from the proceedings. Wine was disguised as milk, perhaps to avoid any association with masculine revelry, or to further emphasize purity. Music, incense, and offerings were made, perhaps even symbolic fertility rites. But no man ever saw them, no man ever would. And maybe that's the point. In a world that meticulously documented everything, the most powerful rituals were the ones no one wrote down, protected by silence, and passed down only through whispered memory. Woman to Woman. Chapter 4. the evolution of alchemy, from sacred magic to modern science, long before it became a medieval obsession with turning lead into gold. Alchemy began in the temples and tombs of ancient Egypt, but in Egypt, it wasn't called alchemy in the sense we know it today. It was known as chemia, meaning the black art, a reference not to anything sinister, but to the rich, dark, fertile soil of the Nile Valley, which the Egyptians called Kemet, the Black Land. To the Egyptians, transformation wasn't just physical, it was sacred, imbued with profound spiritual significance. It applied not only to matter but, crucially, to the human soul. The ancient Egyptians were already masters of practical chemistry. They produced sophisticated cosmetics, fragrant perfumes, exquisite glass, vibrant dyes, and durable metal alloys with remarkable skill. They practiced advanced techniques in embalming, using resin salts like natron and fine linen to meticulously preserve the body for eternity. But these weren't just medical or practical procedures. These were profound rituals of transformation, performed with divine intent, aimed at achieving immortality. Every act of mummification, every pigment ground into paint for a tomb, was part of a grand cosmic process, the meticulous preparation of the body and soul for a successful rebirth in the afterlife. In fact, death itself was seen as a kind of alchemical operation, a process of purification and refinement, just as base metals could be purified and refined in fire. The soul of the dead had to be refined through trials and journeys in the underworld, emerging transformed. The Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and incantations, acted like a detailed guide for this spiritual transmutation, ensuring the deceased's passage. Central to Egyptian thought was the revered figure of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and sacred knowledge, Opten, depicted with a scribe, Spilett. Later, when Greek and Egyptian cultures fused during the Ptolemaic period, Thoth was identified with the Greek god Hermes, creating the mythical sage Hermes, Tris, Magi, Stews, thrice great Hermes. He would become the legendary author of the Hermetic texts, a collection of mystical writings that laid the philosophical and spiritual foundation for alchemy as avant-garde science. These texts spoke not just of material processes, but of divine unity, of the profound correspondence between the macrocosm, the universe, and the microcosm, humanity, famously summarized as above, so below. In Egyptian chemia, the transformation of matter was not merely a physical change, it was deeply symbolic of the transformation of the soul. Turning base metals into shimmering gold was just a metaphor for turning an imperfect, earthly self into a purified divine being, ready for eternal life. So when later alchemists in Greece and Europe searched for the fab-led philosopher's stone or the elixir of eternal life, they were really carrying forward an ancient Egyptian idea that true transformation does end to begin in the lab. With retorts and furnaces, it begins profoundly in the heart, in the spirit. Persian alchemy, a cosmic framework of good versus evil. If Egypt gave alchemy its ritual soul, ancient Persia gave it a moral spine, a cosmic framework rooted in the eternal struggle between light and darkness. In the heart of the Persian Empire, long before medieval laboratories and hidden alchemical societies, the teachings of Zoroaster, Zarathustra, shaped a worldview where transformation was not only desirable but absolutely necessary, a moral imperative. His dualistic vision split the universe into two opposing, powerful forces: Ahura Mazda, the benevolent god of light, truth and order, and Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit of darkness and chaos. This was not just myth. It was a profound metaphysics that deeply influenced alchemical thinking. Zoroastrians worship Ed through fire, a living, purifying symbol of truth and divine illumination. In their temples, sacred flames were never allowed to die. Carefully tended by priests, fire purified, revealed and transformed, much like the alchemist's furnace centuries later, burning away impurities. Persians also developed incredibly advanced metalwork techniques. They were among the first to meticulously refine copper, silver, and gold, to smelt iron for weapons and tools, and to experiment with complex alloys. Their artisans weren't just craftsmen. They were seen as initiates in a cosmic process of perfecting nature, bringing order out of raw materials. Smelting crude or into shining metal was viewed as an act of cosmic alignment, elevating raw, chaotic matter into something orderly, pure, and beautiful. Even the early Saint Persian medicinal texts show traces of proto-alchemical ideas, meticulously listing minerals, metals, plants, and their effects on the human body. They didn't just want to heal the physical body. They wanted to align it with the divine harmony of the universe, bringing it into balance. Later, Islamic scholars would carefully preserve and expand on these Persian alchemical ideas, translating and integrating them. But even in pre-Islamic times, we see the emergence of a powerful theme that would echo through alchemical traditions from Arabia to Europe, that matter is not static, that within every impure substance lies the inherent seed of perfection, waiting to be revealed. It's the same profound idea that would later inspire alchemists to transmute lead into gold, or on a spiritual level, to transform the soul from its base, imperfect state to Adavine one, Persian thought, then offered a moral alchemy, purification not just of elements, but of intention, of spirit. Fire didn't simply melt metals. It burned away falsehood and revealed what was hidden. And in that hidden core, somewhere between smoke and spirit, Persian alchemists believed lay the divine spark that could change anything, even the self. Greek alchemy, the philosophy of logic and elements. If Egypt gave alchemy its sacred rites and Persia its moral framework, it was ancient Greece that tried to explain it all with logic, geometry, and a touch of cosmic arrogance. Here, alchemy didn't vanish. It evolved, transforming under the Greek passion for reason and abstract thought. Greek thinkers took the mystical and chemical traditions of older civilizations and tried to make them make sense, to fit them into a rational universe. But instead of focusing soul lie on crucibles and powders, they reached for philosophy, for the fundamental principles of reality. At the heart of Greek alchemical thought was the widely accepted theory of four elements: earth, water, air, and fire, first proposed by Empedocles. These weren't just physical substances. They were fundamental principles of the universe, the very Lego blocks of reality, each embodying a specific quality. Change, according to this view, was simply the rearrangement and conversion of these elements. Fire could become air, water could become earth, and all things were in a constant dance of transformation, a cosmic ballet of matter. Later, philosophers like Plato added deeper layers of meaning. He described matter as composed of perfect geometrical forms, tiny invisible solids that made up everything we see. In this version, alchemy became a quest not just for chemical reactions, but for harmony with the ideal, perfect world of forms, a reflection of cosmic order. Then came Aristotle, who altered everything with his systematic approach. He proposed that all matter had 4 essential qualities: hot, cold, wet, and dry. By changing these qualities, by manipulating them, you could, in theory, change the substance itself. Lead was considered primarily dry and heavy. Gold was balanced and radiant. So, if you could shift lead's properties, make it more noble, closer to the ideal balance, it could, in theory, become gold. Sound familiar? This revolutionary idea of transmutation, changing one substance into another, became the cornerstone of all later alchemy, driving centuries of experimentation. But the Greeks didn't stop at theory. In Hellenistic Alexandria, a vibrant melting pot of Egyptian mysticism, Greek philosophy, and Babylonian astronomy, alchemy, as a practical discipline, finally began to take concrete shape. Here, scholars and mystics meticulously record early recipes for dyes, perfumes, and metal alloys, but always wrapped them in symbolic, allegorical language, guarding their true meaning. And it's sheer that the mythic figure of Hermes, Tris Magi, stews truly emerged, a synthesis of the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek god Hermes, credited with writing the Hermetic Corpus, a collection of texts that profoundly influenced Western esotericism. These texts spoke of purifying not just matter, but the human soul, urging practitioners to seek divine union through inner transformation, mirroring the alchemical process. To the Greeks, alchemy wasn't just about making money or physical objects. It was about understanding nature's deepest secrets, mirroring the cosmos, and perfecting the self through the hidden laws of reality. And that made it not just science, but something dangerously close to divine power, a quest for ultimate knowledge. Alexandrian alchemy, fusion of experiment and mystery. In the bustling port city of Alexandria, a vibrant nexus of cultures and ideas, alchemy found its true laboratory, not just of matter, but of ideas, founded by Alexander the Great and ruled by the Ptolemies. Alexandria was where Greek rationalism, Egyptian ritual, Babylonian astrology, and Persian metaphysics collided in Aswurl, in intellectual stew, creating a fertile ground for new thought. At its heart was the great library of Alexandria, a legendary beacon of ancient knowledge, where scrolls and scholars gathered from across the known world, exchanging wisdom. Alchemy in this environment didn't just survive, it thrived, evolving into something richer and more complex. It was here that alchemy truly became both spiritual and practical, mystical and experimental. Egyptian temple rites merged seamlessly with Greek natural philosophy. Babylonian star charts were studied alongside Greek medicine and Egyptian metallurgy, creating a holistic approach to understanding the universe. The result was a new kind of knowledge, half science, half sacrament, a deeply intertwined pursuit. One of the early street and most mysterious figures of Alexandrian alchemy was Mary the Jewess. She is credited with inventing some of the first alchemical apparatus, tools that revolutionized the practice. The bain-marie, a double boiler still used in kitchens and laboratories today, is named after her. The tribicles, a complex distillation device, and a system of vapor purification are also attributed to her. Her work suggests that Alexandrian alchemists weren't just theorizing, they were actively conducting real chemical experiments, meticulously observing and documenting reactions. Another key figure was Zosimos of Panopolis, a 3rd, 4th century CE alchemist who left behind some of the early street-known extensive writings on alchemy in Greek. But Zosimos didn't see alchemy as just physical transformation. He wrote of dreams, visions, and spiritual purification, emphasizing the inner journey. For him, turning lead into gold was a profound metaphor for turning the corrupted human soul into something divine, pure and perfect. He meticulously described the alchemical vessel not just as a container for substances, but as a symbol of the body itself. The fire, the soul's inner torment, the vapor, the divine essence rising in spiritual purification. His writings beautiful lie blurred, the line between chemistry and mysticism, between matter and metaphor, revealing the deep connections. Alexandrian alchemists also leaned heavily on Hermeticism, the teachings attributed to Hermes, Tris, Magi, Saint, Us, as above, so below, they wrote, reiterating the fundamental principle. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm. Purify one, and you touch the other. In Alexandria, alchemy was no longer just about materials. It was about reality itself. It asked not just what things were made of, but why they could change, and whether the soul could be transformed alongside matter. Alchemy had become mirror of the cosmos and of ourselves, a profound reflection, and it was only just getting started, its influence destined to spread for centuries. Islamic alchemy, the dawn of science. When the great library of Alexandria fell into ruin and Europe slipped into the early Middle Ages, often called the Dark Ages, it was the Islamic world that became the new, vigilant guardian of alchemical knowledge. From the 8th to the 13th centuries, under the enlightened Abbasid Caliphate, the Islamic Golden Age turned cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba into vibrant, unparalleled centers of scientific and philosophical inquiry. Greek, Persian, and Indian texts, including crucial alchemical treatises, were meticulously translated into Arabic at a record pace, preserving ancient wisdom. But here's the twist. Islamic scholars didn't just preserve ancient alchemy. They transformed it, pushing its boundaries and laying the groundwork for modern chemistry. Enter Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Geber, a polymath working in 8th century Kufa. He's often called the father of chemistry, though his immense legacy is still steeped in an alluring mystery. Jabir's writings, which number in the hundreds, blended Greek elemental theory, Persian mysticism, and Quranic cosmology into a structured, systematic science. He introduced Aragoras, systematic approach to experimentation, emphasizing observation and repeatable results. He believed all metals were composed of sulfur and mercury, not in the literal sense, but as fundamental principles. Sulfur representing combustion and change, mercury standing for liquidity and volatility. According to Jabir, if you could lie balance these two forces within a substance, you could transmute one metal into another. He also introduced numerous techniques still recognizable today: distillation, crystallization, sublimation, filtration, and calcination. His meticulously designed apparatuses became the blueprint for medieval laboratories across Europe. But Islamic alchemy wasn't just technical. it retained the profound spiritual heart of earlier traditions. Alchemy was seen as a path to divine understanding, a way to uncover God's hidden order in the universe. Transforming matter was a metaphor for purifying the soul, aligning oneself with God's perfect creation. Later alchemists like Al-Razi and Avicenna ibn Sina debated alchemy's legitimacy and methods. Al-Razi, a renowned physician, strongly supported it, emphasizing its practical medical applications, while Avicenna, a brilliant polymath, criticized the literal idea of transmutation but deeply respected the discipline's philosophical and ethical aims. Even in their disagreements, they elevated alchemy into something more than a secretive craft. It became to chemistry, metaphysics, spiritual discipline, and moral philosophy, all intertwined. European scholars would later rediscover these rich Arabic texts, translating them into Latin and sparking a powerful revival of alchemy in the West. But the soul of that alchemy, the belief that matter and spirit mirrored each other, was preserved, clarified, and systematized by Muslim scholars, and in their skilled hands, alchemy stopped being merely legend and started becoming science. Medieval European alchemy flames in monasteries and universities when the translated works of Arabic alchemists like Jabir, Ibn Hayyan, Al-Razi, and Avicenna began to flow into Europe during the 12th century. Something remarkable happened, a powerful revival of alchemy. This time, it took root under the shadowed stone towers of medieval monasteries and emerging universities, adapting to a new intellectual landscape. Europe had been in something of an intellectual hibernation following the fall of Rome. But with the rise of vibrant translation schools in places like Toledo and Sicily, Latin scholars gained unprecedented access to a treasure trove of forgotten wisdom. From classical Greek philosophy to cutting-edge Islamic science. Among these translated works were the foundational writings of alchemy, often riddled with strange symbols, mysterious ingredients, and Tantalese promises of transformation. The Europeans were instantly hooked. To them, alchemy offered more than just the material prospect of gold. It offered profound knowledge, immense power, and even the ultimate dream of immortality. The elusive philosopher Stone became the new holy grail. Fab led to transmute base metals into shimmering gold and bestow eternal life. But it was just a material object. It deeply symbolized the perfection of both matter and spirit, a profound inner transformation. Medieval alchemists took this dual nature very seriously. Figures like Albertus Magnus and Roger Bacon were not only respected RS, but also groundbreaking experimental scientists. They believed that God had encoded the secrets of creation into the natural world, and that alchemy was a sacred way to read that divine script, to understand the deeper workings of creation. For them, alchemy wasn't sorcery or forbidden magic. It was Christian natural philosophy, a legitimate means to understand the divine order. Through the systematic transformation of substances, laboratories became extensions of monastic cloisters, places of fire and glass, retorts, alembics, crucibles, and furnaces filled with substances like sulfur, mercury, antimony, and lead became the essential tools of their quest. Experiments were meticulously recorded in coded texts, full of complex allegory and metaphor, tradition that made alchemy seem arcane and impenetrable to outsiders. But beneath the rich symbolism, serious experimental work was on Denia Bly being done. One of the most influential figures of this period was Pseudo Guber, a mysterious Latin writer who adapted and expanded upon Arabic works, creating influential treatises that became standard references for later alchemists. Another key name was Arnold of Villanova, whose skill fully blurred the lines between medicine and alchemy, focusing on creating potent elixirs that could heal, purify, and rejuvenate the body. For all its secrecy, medieval alchemy was untruly underground. It was openly debated in universities, sponsored by princes and noblemen, and practiced by respected priests. Yet, despite its high spiritual ambitions, many still chased the gold, sometimes literally, sometimes metaphorically. And so, medieval Europe kept the flame of transformation burning, one part faith, one part fire, and one part philosophical dream, carrying the ancient wisdom forward. Rosicrucians. The Renaissance's mystical bloom. As Europe gently emerged from the medieval era into the vibrant tapestry of the Renaissance, alchemy didn't fade away. Instead, it morphed, becoming more secretive, more symbolic, and strangely, even more mystical. Out of this rich fusion of Hermetic philosophy, Christian mysticism, and Renaissance humanism emerged one of the most curious and influential movements in alchemical history, the Rosicrucians. In the early 1600s, anonymous manifestos began circulating, mysterious lie across Europe, Fama Fraternities, Confessio Fraternities, and the chemical wedding of Christian Rosencreutz. These enigmatic texts told the compelling story of a hidden brotherhood, the Fraternity of the Rosy Cross, founded by a mythical figure named Christian Rosencreutz. This legendary figure had supposedly journeyed through the East, learning secret wisdom before returning to Europe to quietly guide spiritual seekers towards enlightenment. But here's the twist. There's no concrete evidence. The Rosicrucians existed as an actual, organized brotherhood, at least not at first. They were primarily an idea, a powerful symbol, and their influence was profound, reverberating through intellectual and spiritual circles. Rosicrucian alchemy was not about literally making gold from base metals. It was first and foremost about spiritual enlightenment. Its beautiful lie combined alchemical transformation with Christian esotericism, seeing the purification of metals as a profound metaphor for the purification of the human soul. The philosopher Stony, instead of being a physical substance, became a symbol for Christ's consciousness, for inner rebirth, and for ultimate union with the divine. Their manifestos promised a grand reformation of science, religion, and politics, a secret spiritual revolution that would lead humanity into a new golden age. But they offered no addresses, no names, no identifiable leaders, just potent symbols. The rose representing secrecy, beauty, and love, and the cross representing Sventrition. This was alchemy as spiritual allegory, rich in metaphor, full of veiled references, designed to be understood only by those ready for its deeper truths. The Rosicrucians believed that truth was hidden not because it was forbidden, but because it had to be earned through personal, inner transformation, a process of profound self-discovery. Their ideas subtly influenced scientists, mystics, artists, and poets across Europe. Isaac Newton, the towering figure of the scientific revolution, owned Rosicrucian texts and studied them extensively. Johann Valiant, in Andria, thought to be the actual author of the chemical wedding, clarified later that he intended the story as an allegory, not a literal history. Yet, the Rosicrucian ideas spread like wildfire through occult circles, inspiring countless seekers. By now, alchemy had become deeply layered with meaning. To some, it was still about materials. To others, it was pure metaphor. To the Rosicrucians, it was a spiritual path hidden in plain sight. And, though their brotherhood may have been mythical, their influence was very real, whispering through the centuries that the true gold is within. Alchemy's embrace of modern science. As the 17th century unfolded, alchemy, the ancient art of transformation, began rubbing shoulders with something utterly unexpected, modern science. But it wasn't a clean, immediate break. The line between alchemist and chemist remained wonderful, lie blurred, and many of the towering figures who built the very foundations of the scientific method were, paradoxically, still chasing the elusive philosopher, Stony, one of the most famous examples. The brilliant Isaac Newton. Yes, the same man who meticulously formulated the laws of motion and universal gravitation, spent more time in his life studying alchemy than he did physics or mathematics in secret. Newton filled countless notebooks with arcane experiments, meticulously analyzing ancient symbols and attempting to uncover the divine mechanics of the universe through alchemical processes. To him, the cosmos was a divinely crafted machine, and alchemy was a complex language, written in fire and gold, designed to understand its deepest secrets. Newton was untalony in this dual pursuit. Robert Boyle, often revered as the father of modern chemistry, was also deeply steeped in alchemical thought. His famous 1661 book, The Skeptical Chemist, brilliantly challenged the classical for element theory and laid crucial groundwork for chemical analysis, emphasizing empirical observation. But Boyle also firmly believed in the transmutation of metals and saw alchemy as a perfectly valid field of inquiry, a pathway to deeper knowledge. So what changed? The key difference was methodology and a shift in emphasis. Alchemy had long been shrouded in symbolism, secrecy, and spiritual metaphor, its practices often esoteric. But emerging scientists began demanding clarity, repeatability, and empirical evidence. They started shedding the mystical language in favor of quantifiable results, precise measurements, and observable phenomena. The laboratory, once a place of occult wonder and mysterious transformations, became a disciplined space of measurable reactions and precision tools. Alchemical instruments, the crucibles, alembics furnaces, and retorts evolved into the backbone of modern chemistry. Their designs refined for scientific rigor. The literal dream of turning lead into gold faded, replaced by the practical, systematic pursuit of understanding matter's fundamental building blocks. And yet, the alchemical worldview didn't entirely disappear. The profound notion that matter can transform, that systems contain hidden patterns waiting to be discovered, and that humans can shape the natural world. Through deep understanding, these core alchemical ideas quietly endured, adapting to the changing intellectual landscape. They simply dressed in lab coats instead of robes, adopting new names and new methods. By the 18th century, alchemy was largely dismissed as pseudoscience, a quaint relic. But history isn't so tidy. The truth is, modern science was built in many ways on alchemical bones, and the alchemists, with all their strange symbols and impossible dreams, did more than just tinker with metals. They asked a fundamental, audacious question: Can the world be changed? And that profound question still drives science today, a timeless echo of ancient inquiries. Alchemy's modern echoes, transformation of mind and matter. By the 19th century, alchemy had seemingly vanished, relegated to the dusty corners of history, dismissed by rational thinkers as a quaint relic of pre-scientific superstition. But like mercury in a flask, its essence never truly disappeared. Instead, alchemy transmuted, finding new life, new forms, and new interpretations in psychology, literature, art, and even modern spirituality. The most surprising and influential inheritor of alchemical thought was Carl Jung, the brilliant Swiss psychologist. To Jung, alchemy was in tab out, literal transmutation of metals. It was a profound symbolic map of the human psyche. He studied alchemical texts obsessively, recognizing in their cryptic diagrams and metaphors ancient language of the unconscious mind. The philosopher Stony became a powerful symbol of self-actualization, the process of becoming a complete and integrated individual, the alchemical process itself, calcination burning away impurities, dissolution breaking down, fermentation transforming, coagulation solidifying a new form, mirrored the psychological journey toward individuation, the integration of all aspects of the self, conscious and unconscious. Alchemy, Jung believed, was the original therapy, a coded spiritual practice disguised as chemistry. Its real aim was to make gold, but to heal and transform the soul. And in this sense, alchemy never stopped evolving. In literature, its spirit lives on in works like Go, the S. Faust, Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, and countless fantasy stories where hidden knowledge, profound transformation, and ultimate redemption take center stage. The archetype of the alchemist, the seeker of hidden truths, remains potent in modern spirituality and self-help. Alchemy serves as a powerful metaphor for personal growth. The idea that life suffering, if consciously faced and refined, can produce wisdom, wholeness, and a stronger self, even in science. Subtle echoes remain. The core dream of alchemy, to understand and master the transformation of matter, finds a curious, if vastly different, reflection in nuclear physics, where elements really can be transmuted through atomic processes. The alchemists were wrong about how it works, but not that it was possible, and culturally, we still chase alchemical goals, perhaps without realizing it. The search for a miraculous cure-all medicine, the relentless pursuit of eternal youth, the fascination with the hidden, the symbolic, the transformative, the enduring power of alchemy lies not in its failed recipes for gold, but in its boundless imagination, its willingness to believe that the world is mutable, that what is base can become noble, and that knowledge, properly applied, can elevate both matter and soul. Alchemy didn't it simply changed form. It became chemistry. It became psychology. It became story. It became metaphor. And in some ways, it became you, because every time you struggle, grow, suffer, refine, and emerge stronger, you reperforming your own little alchemy, not in gold, but in spirit. And that, dear listener, was always the real magic. As our journey through these ancient whispers comes to a close, allow these stories to settle gently in your mind. The flavors of Rome, the courage of Hannibal, the ancient dance of festivals, and the timeless quest of alchemy. all echoes from a past that continues to shape us. May your night be filled with peace, and your dreams be rich with history. Good night.